Everybody, this is the regular meeting of the Encinitas City Council. It's 6 p.m. on Wednesday, January 27, 2021. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Hensy.
Here.
Councilmember Mosca.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Here.
And Mayor Blakespear.
Here.
The record will show all members of the City Council are present.
Okay, thank you. And I will call on the Deputy Mayor to lead us in the pledge.
Okay, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to a special presentation or proclamation. So today we have a presentation of Election Heroes Day. And I am pleased that we see Ann Olmsted here with us today. I see her right there on my screen. And I think we also have Eddie Cooper Jr. here and Cynthia Payas from the County Registrar of Voters and President of the San Diego Local 197 American Postal Workers Union is Eddie. And if both of them are here, I'll give them a chance to say a few words after I read the proclamation.
Okay.
So whereas San Diego County Registrar of Voters, staff, poll workers, local United States Postal Service workers, the California Secretary of State, and the City Clerk's Office of the City of Encinitas supported efforts for more than 40,000 Encinitas residents to cast their votes this past fall. And whereas the 2020 election cycle was unique as election workers faced unprecedented challenges that involved bringing an election that would allow residents to participate in the most sacred right of our democracy, fair and free voting, in doing so safely and securely with trust and confidence that each vote would be counted. And whereas election workers rose to the occasion as they ensured our region's election operations ran smoothly, implementing super polling with 235 locations for in-person voting, and with 126 drop-off locations across the San Diego region. And whereas recent events in our nation's capital have shown the critical need for our community to demonstrate their united support, faith, and trust in the integrity and legitimacy of our electoral system, and of those who work to make it function. And whereas election workers have showcased outstanding stewardship of election integrity and of our democracy, and it is with deepest gratitude that we recognize their work as they serve as a reminder that our democracy works because of their work. And be it proclaimed by the City of Encinitas that this council, for and on behalf of the people of Encinitas, does hereby proclaim January 27, 2021 to be Election Heroes Day in the City of Encinitas. And so I will, yes, thank you. A little round of applause. If we were in person, I would hand you the microphone and I would say, would the three of you like to say a few words? And I can start with Ann.
Oh, thank you. I would very much like to introduce Cynthia Payas, who is the acting registrar for the County of San Diego. Cynthia.
Thank you, Ann. It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
First off, I am so proud to accept this proclamation on behalf of my staff, our seasonal election workers, and the over 4,000 poll workers that assisted voters at the polls for 4 days for the November election. The voters did their job too. They turned out. We had over 1.6 million people turn out to vote, and that was just amazing. I couldn't be prouder of the way we conducted this election. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia. And now I'd like to introduce Eddie Cooper Jr., who is the president of the American Postal Workers Union. Mr. Cooper.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ann and Catherine and the Encinitas City Council. And on behalf of the San Diego County Postal Workers, it is a distinct honor to accept this proclamation and acknowledgement. As always, postal workers strive to provide outstanding service to the American public, and this acknowledgement means a lot, and we really appreciate it. Thanks so much. And as a side note, I must say, because I did mention this to our membership last evening, we had a membership meeting last evening, and I shared with our members that we were going to be having this honor bestowed upon us this evening. And one of my members, Ed Knight, wanted me to make sure I mentioned to your deputy mayor, Mr. Kranz, that he went to high school with you back in the 70s. He don't know if you remember him, Mr. Kranz, but I told him I'll mention if I had an opportunity. And he said that one time you kicked him out of a league softball game back
Oh,
in the
no,
70s
not me.
because he was too young. So I just wanted to mention that again. He's Ed Knife, and he's our motor vehicle services director, and he wanted me to mention that. But thank you so much, this Encinitas City Council. We really appreciate this proclamation and acknowledgement.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank everybody on behalf of the Nonviolence Coalition of San Diego County, which is striving to make sure that our transition is peaceful and everybody is able to express their opinions without violence. Thank you very much, Catherine and council members.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to have you here today, all three of you. Thank you so much for coming. And I just want to recognize also, Anne was one of the original members of the city council when the city incorporated in 1986. And now she's a very active member of the League of Women Voters, which does a lot of important things, but puts on forums for candidates to be able to talk to each other and answer the same question at the same time. And it's really the gold standard in terms of the forums that we do. And so I just want to recognize all the different ways that we contribute to our democracy and making it so that the people have a chance to elect their representatives and that it's a fair system and the transition takes place peacefully. It's really important that we take that moment to recognize it, and that's what we're doing today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I could, I'd like to also recognize a couple other alumni of San Diego who made a career with the U.S. Postal Service. Jim Villa is still serving. He drives truck. And Victor Jimenez is a retiree, I believe, and had a long career with the Postal Service. And so I appreciate all your efforts and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Have a great night.
Good night. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so next we have our oral communication.
Yes, Mayor, we do have 7. Our first speaker is Rochelle Collier. Rochelle, you can start when you are ready, and you do have 3 minutes. You'll hear the timer when your 3 minutes is up.
Hello, Mayor Blakespear and City Council. My name is Rochelle Collier, and I live on Hillcrest Drive in Leucadia. I really miss coming to City Council. I can't believe I'm saying that. But anyway, I know you are aware of all the development and proposed development on Vulcan, La Costa, and Highway 101 in the northwest corner of Leucadia. The community is deeply concerned about the cumulative effects on our neighborhood, traffic, public safety, and quality of life. And I absolutely know that you are all aware of this too. The Planning Commission just proposed reviewing the planned developments and potential impacts on traffic and public safety in this area, and that's a good start. I'm asking that our planning department start looking at all the development in a way that not only facilitates development, but takes into consideration the people who have lived in the neighborhood and their ability to walk, bike, and drive safely. We asked for improvements on Vulcan, and thank you, Tony. Finally, we are getting some. But my fear is we are getting improvements, and they will be totally inadequate if all this development proceeds as planned. We need to find a way together to protect our community and way of life from the cumulative effects of the development. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rochelle. Our next speaker is Mike Bullock. Mike, you have 3 minutes. You can start when you are ready. Mike, you need to unmute your microphone.
I didn't know I had to do that. Oh, okay.
There you go.
Let me start over again. Honorable Mayor and council members, I'm Mike Bullock from Oceanside. I'm a retired satellite systems engineer. I present systems engineering papers at conferences, such as conferences for the Air and Waste Management Association. My focus is transportation and climate change. Back in 2017, the following words were added to your climate action plan. Quote, develop and implement a program to incentivize city employees commuting to work by bike or other modes of alternative transport as a model for other local employers, end quote. Those words have the potential to greatly improve your climate action plan. They were added after a comment letter I wrote asked your city to implement the same car parking system that the Sierra Club had proposed to the county. Clearly, your CAP administrator was not ready to commit Encinitas to that car parking system. That was understandable. However, your employees would love the car parking system because with it, they would earn more net pay. The car parking system is called Dividend Account Parking, or DAP, or DAP for short. DAP is fully defined in the Sierra Club comment letter that was sent to your city in the early days of your CAP process. It is also defined in the attachments to the email I sent you today. The Encinitas CAP program administrator and I had a series of Zoom meetings on DAP early last year. The discussion stopped when the administrator told me that she was told that Encinitas would never accept what she called metered parking. DAP is a system that operates the employee parking for the financial gain of the employees. Telecommuting was the short-term alternative. However, simply encouraging employees to work from home will not reduce driving because anything other than pricing that takes cars off the road will induce enough additional traffic to add that same number of cars back onto the road. Climate change is urgent. Please put DAP on your agenda for a discussion as to its feasibility for your employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Doug Warenga.
Hi, thank you for your attention. I echo Rochelle's comments earlier. My name is Doug Wieringa. I want to thank the council for your service to our beautiful city. My wife and I have lived at 325 La Costa Avenue for the last 18 years. This is our forever home and community. Our Northwest Leucadia and West La Costa Avenue corridor and surrounding community needs your help. We request that you please pause all nearby development projects and first make improvements to improve residents' safety. That's bike, pedestrian, and car traffic on La Costa Avenue west of Highway 5. As you know, there are no sidewalks or other traffic calming tools in place. Safety issues have been building for years now and are acute, even ahead of many hundreds of new potential residents and guests who will also occupy and travel amongst this corridor as projected by various high density development petitions. Those numbers do not account for hundreds of new hotel doors and townhomes at nearby Pono Beach in Carlsbad, and whose occupants would also travel along the same La Costa corridor. The density bonus developer incentives and SB 330 law substantially adds to the amount of people who might utilize this corridor and thus exacerbates the existing safety problems. Please do not let SB 330 steamroll Encinitas. I know other cities are pushing back against the state in this regard. While the city leadership has stated concern about being sued by developers, the city also has grave exposure to lawsuits from unsafe and inadequate infrastructure along La Costa Avenue. Once safe infrastructure exists for residents and guests, let's please practice thoughtful and responsible development. Maximizing every possible new guest and resident also negatively impacts our quality of life, other quality of life topics beyond safety. That includes carbon footprint, resulting greenhouse gases, and impact to our beautiful but also fragile beaches, lagoon, and ocean. You have the opportunity to make a difference for us and our awesome community. Please prioritize the safety of your existing residents and pause all nearby developments until safe infrastructure is in place. Thank you for your service and your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marianne Penton. Marianne, you can start when you're ready and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Interestingly, all these comments so far are all related. It's very interesting to hear this. Okay, here's my little comment here. City Council, I know you have so many communities to take care of, and I just want to thank you for acknowledging Northwest Leucadia's needs and issues, as well as all the other areas. And I know it's a really, really tough job. As you work through the CIP budget, as you finalize design costs along the railroad tracks and coastal access, I'm hoping you'll consider the results of the Cross Connect study and high density and use of Northwest Leucadia, both current and in the near future. Again, related to all these other issues by traffic, foot paths and all that, and safety issues. And that's my message today. We thank you for considering it in all your decision making, and we're with you. We want to work with you. Okay, thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you, Marianne. Our next speaker is Christine Schindler. Christine, you can start when you're ready.
Very good. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you so much. So hello, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for your service. I live in East Encinitas off South Willow Spring. Happy to hear the other public comments about Leucadia. Certainly comes up a lot during our Encinitas Bike Walk meetings, and there are a lot of considerations with new development and mobility. I did want to talk to you about Cyclovia Encinitas. You all know that we're going virtual this year, and it kicked off on the 17th of this month. Instead of having a one-day open street event like we did last year, we're having a multitude of events that are going to happen throughout the year. So I just wanted to make you aware of it, make the public aware of it, and we'll be reaching out more and more as things heat up. I wanted to share kudos for Nick Buck. He's the Park and Rec person that's heading up the planning group. We had our second planning group meeting today, and he's doing a fantastic job. So kudos to Nick. I also wanted to let you know that e-bike education is coming. We're doing some things with regard to Cyclovia Encinitas to get e-bike information out there into our local bike shops and online and in social media. But we also have a program that's coming virtually from the San Diego County Bike Coalition, myself and others. That's a webinar for mostly geared toward adults. And so we're going to be rolling that out here in the Encinitas community and in North County and probably across San Diego. So that's just been scheduled. It's the 26th of February. It's called All About E-Bikes. It'll get information needed about safety and encouragement for adults and youth to do the right thing and to follow safety law. So I want to make you aware of that, and also just wanted to acknowledge and thank you again for traffic engineering work on South Willow Spring, Public Works as well, restriping and doing some traffic calming. I've gotten a lot of feedback from neighbors, and everybody believes that it's making a difference. A little bit of parking issues, but I think that can be resolved, but the vast majority of comments has been positive. I have just a few more seconds. I wanted to say, whoever sneezed during the Pledge of Allegiance, bless you. The proclamation for election workers and postal workers, I so appreciate that happening. What an unusual year for holding an election, and they've had to pivot multiple times. And I think from my vantage point, they did a wonderful job. Thank you again for your service.
Madam Mayor, if I could say one word. Christine, thank you so much for your comments today. The topic of e-bikes and safety in our city is becoming a big one. And I know that our Parks and Recreation Department and Commission is looking at this. And I'm hoping that you can perhaps connect with our Director of Parks and Rec, Jennifer Campbell, and make sure you're sharing all the information that you have on e-bike safety. including the adult safety stuff, but also the youth. We have a lot of young kids that are riding e-bikes and a lot of folks that are having issues in terms of safety on our recreational trails and sidewalks. So if you can connect with Jennifer, that would be awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, so I'm in close communication with Nick Buck, and I'm assuming that he's updating Jennifer, but I can reach out to her directly as well.
All right, that's probably a good connection with Nick as well. Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure.
Our next speaker is Becky Rapp. Becky, you can start when you're ready. You do have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Encinitas City Council. My name is Becky Rapp. I'm a mother to 3 teens and a youth group mentor. Today, I'd like to bring to your attention Supervisor Desmond's heroic efforts with the Let Them Play initiative, in which many families across the city are joining. Many teens have resorted to club sports who travel with their teams over state borders to play in tournaments. Sadly, the majority of youth in our county can't afford these expensive activities, leaving them home worrying about their ability to play and how they will compare to many of their teammates who never stopped playing. As you can imagine, this is a very difficult time for teens as anxiety and mental health issues rise. Many are home feeling isolated without positive role models that they would have otherwise received through coaches and teachers. As isolation continues and 11 months have passed since schools and sports were open, we're seeing a direct correlation that shows increase of marijuana use among teens. A recent study showed that since COVID-19 social distancing began, the frequency of marijuana use in adolescents increased. 49% of those teens misusing marijuana are using in isolation and at home alone. Mass commercialization and marketing of marijuana to youth decreases the perception of harm and suggests long-term negative effects on our teens. Monitoring the future data proves that vaping marijuana in adolescents has more than doubled, causing detrimental cognitive development. This, combined with the lack of physical interaction like sports, is a disaster for adolescents. Today, I ask you to join Supervisor Desmond in Let Them Play, giving hope to the disadvantaged. Let's create a more equitable city, giving fair and equal playing to those most vulnerable, sending a message of support to youth. Teens getting outside and playing sports will only help to increase hope in their futures instead of increasing the time and opportunity at home getting high. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then finally, Douglas Shaw, I wanted to check with you. Do you want to speak under oral communications or just for the appeal?
Just for the appeal, please.
Okay, I'll call you during that item. That does conclude oral communications, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the public speakers tonight. Raised some really good issues. We have next in front of us changes to the agenda. Do we have any?
There are no changes to the posted agenda. And moving to the consent calendar, item 8F has a public speaker.
Okay, I would entertain a motion on the balance.
I'll move the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
You can start voting. Councilmember Hensy?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Krantz?
Yes.
Mayor Blakespear?
Yes.
And that motion does carry unanimously. We can move to item 8F. And do you want to hear from the speaker first?
Yes, please.
Okay, our speaker is Diana Nunes. Diana, you can start when ready. You do have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Dear members of the council and Mayor Blakespear, this evening you are being asked to reappropriate a portion of the general fund to complete the design of the Verde Undercrossing project. This information is in attachment number 3, page 20 of 36. In response to this request, I would like to state that multiple discussions and proclamations by the council have resulted in an understanding that a safe rail crossing in Northwest Leucadia is highly needed. I ask the council and members of the finance team reconsider this amendment request of transferring $150,000 from the general fund back to project CS16E. Due to the scarcity of general funds, these funds could be used more effectively by keeping by keeping them in the general fund and redirecting them to meet current higher prioritized needs. While understanding the rationale of having a design-ready project if monies or grants become available, an untoward outcome of that possibility is that possible grants, city staffing, and city revenues would then be funneled to the design-ready Verdi rail crossing, jeopardizing the possibility of moving towards the realization of a rail crossing in Northwest Leucadia. As reiterated many times by the members of this council and the staff, the current reality is that the city of Encinitas has a limited staffing bandwidth and is always under the constraint of its fiscal limitations. Coupled with this is the reality that the commitments of this council may not be shared by future councils. The institutional knowledge that exists today may not be available tomorrow. Therefore, I ask that all actions of this current council reflect the commitments made to public safety by redirecting these funds from CS16E to the general fund, where they can be effectively used in the advancement of a safe rail crossing in Northwest Leucadia. Thank you very much for your efforts and consideration. All your work is highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Diana.
That concludes speakers.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kranz has his hand up.
I am also concerned about these monies and how they might best be used to advance the priorities that we have established in previous communications. I'm not necessarily prepared to say that it wouldn't be money well spent to finish the design of the project in Cardiff, but I would rather have an open conversation and have more details about what's expected from this additional $150,000, what the length of time is left to get to full design, what position that puts us in terms of competitiveness for grant funding, what the match requirements of the city might be were we to be awarded a grant. There's just too many open questions for me to approve this particular line item from general fund to this particular project. So maybe the city manager could speak to some of those issues, but also let me know whether you think it would be reasonable to have this on an agenda in the next month or two, or maybe even as part of our strategic planning session in preparation for the budgeting.
Let's hear from the city manager.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem Krantz. This is always one of those conundrums, and I'll ask our community development director to jump on. We added this into the budget so that we would have the potential for a shovel-ready project if federal stimulus grant money becomes available. And it's always what comes first, the cart or the horse, because I don't think we would be able to tell you right now. It's just that if we have it ready to go, we would have it available for funding. I see that Community Development Director Lillian Daughtry is on now, and perhaps she could add some additional information. We are also okay with bringing this back separately for more information at another time as well.
Thank you, City Managers. So I believe she has accurately represented. So we have spent a significant amount of resources to get to the position we are in. We have completed all of the entitlements. Approximately $100,000 is needed in order to complete that effort, which could then be placed on a shelf, and when ready, we are then able to bring it forward. However, if we do not complete the work, then we will not have a project that is ready when we need it. We believe that this project is something that the city does need. It has been a priority in the past. We have, as I mentioned, allocated significant resources to the design of this undercrossing. Undercrossings are critical to this community. It may not be the top priority at this time. However, having that completed design ready and available would be something that would benefit us in the future. I do have Ed Wimmer, city engineer, on the line. Should you have any specific questions regarding the technical scope of work.
Okay, thank you. I see Councilmember Mosca's hand is up too.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, there's so much, we've been talking about this, you know, a lot lately, just the needs of our entire city and trying to prioritize all the various needs in our city. And I'm always happy to take a step back and kind of talk about this, but I think it's fair to remind ourselves that Cardiff, this particular site has been a discussion for us for some time. This is not something that just came up. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into this site over the years, and there have been efforts in the past to move funds out of this account, and I've resisted that in the past. We once started off with a crossing at Montgomery, and then it moved over to Verde. And but for the fact that it moved from Montgomery to Verde, it would have been fully funded and moving forward for our city. This is an important area, just like the whole rail corridor is important for us. And so I would say that when we're looking at prioritizing, this is already something that we've talked about. We've promised the community. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on. It makes no sense to start kind of moving away from this now. And so I would say we can take a step back to talk about it and remind ourselves of what the priority has been and what we've been talking to the community about. But I don't think that this is any kind of radical step. This is logical step for us to take this today or in a couple of weeks from now, but to replenish this fund and make sure that this project is ready for any external funding that we can get to get it done, because that's frankly what we've promised our community.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember, Deputy Mayor, have your hand back up.
And I have a little bit of different recollection of the level of funding that was ever allocated for this project. It was only going to be built with grant funding. We never ever had the money allocated for the construction of this project. And I think, you know, there is no question that everywhere along the rail corridor, people are interested in improvements such as quiet zones and more safe and legal crossings and other things. And for that reason, I think it's especially important that we make an informed decision, one that has everything pretty well spelled out. And I'm afraid, you know, the way this transfer is taking place doesn't meet that that standard for me. So I am interested in how much have we spent. I'm interested in knowing, frankly, why we need to spend more. I think we had budgeted for this project. And so I'm interested in knowing what is the requirement for plussing it up. If maybe we took money away from there or whatever, that seems a little odd because we were contractually obligated for some things. And so I'm not comfortable just making the transfer without having that additional information. So I would make a motion that we put that money back into the general fund and then come back for this discussion when we've got all the details of exactly what the strategy is and how we anticipate you know, competing for grants. And most importantly, if we are successful in obtaining grants, what the local match might be expected to be, because it's in the multi-millions most likely, which puts us in a whole different, creates a whole different set of problems. So, you know, I think that having that information before us is pretty important.
Okay, I'm not hearing a second, so that motion dies for lack
I
of a
had my
second.
hand up.
I know, I'm
my
going to
hand-
call on, I'm going
Okay.
to call on you, but I wanted
But
to.
I would second that motion.
Okay. Before I called on you, I was just going to ask staff to say how much money they've put in, how much money, my recollection is it's about 900,000, but how much money have we put into the design of this?
Madam Mayor, you're correct. We're gonna, I don't have the exact number at my fingertips, but we're approaching $1 million. We're looking at another 100,000 to finish off the design. So you're absolutely right. We're, you know, literally this is the last little bit to finish the design.
Okay.
And the design, does that mean that we have another set of drawings where we have to get 100% engineered, ready to build? Or are we talking, does design to you mean ready to let out for bid?
No, this would be to let out to bid. So as you recall, when this was pre-COVID, but the direction from the council was to get the big ticket projects that did not have construction dollars, to get them finished for design, because there has been, at least in the last 9 to 12 months, there's been an expectation that the federal government would be sending out some kind of a stimulus package for infrastructure. And so we're hearing, President Biden talking about it. We hear from Carpi, our Washington lobbyist. We have already sent a project list to Sandag, because they also believe that there's going to be a stimulus package coming down. And so our agency, Sandag, has been polling us to say, tell us what your shovel-ready projects are, because when this money hits, we need shovel-ready projects to spend it fast. That's going to be the requirement. And so we have been hustling on projects like Birmingham, like Verdi, like Hygeia, to get them all finished, so that if this money hits, we have them ready and we can pounce and get basically free money.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councilmember Hinsey seconded Councilmember Cran's motion, and now I'll go ahead and call on you for comment.
I would agree with Tony on this one, in that there's enough interest from the community in Northwest Leucadia that we take a really close look at it. I think that $100,000, $50,000 to see what the potential is to use that money in a different way that would meet the goals that we have in Northwest Leucadia is worth our careful consideration. While I really appreciate the approach that staff's taking to get these shovel-ready projects queued up to be able to receive that grant funding, I do think that if we have shovel-ready projects we can offer in Northwest Leucadia, that's where the investment's really needed in this next year.
I'm going to make a substitute motion that we move forward with the staff's recommendation. I thought that Tony's original thought was to press the pause button to get some more information. Clearly, we've gotten more information. It's not in the best interest of the city to take a step back. So my substitute motion will be to move the staff's recommendation at this time.
And I'll go ahead and second that. And I'm going to make some comments too, but I see the city manager's hand is up, and so I'll call on you, Pam.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, one thing that I think that the staff neglected to mention is that I think that there is a concern in North Leucadia that somehow that this is a competition between this project and a North Leucadia project. I did want to make sure that the council's aware that the North Leucadia undercrossing project is going out for RFP. I believe it either went out today or it'll be going out tomorrow. So just want to reassure the community that it's not a competition between the two. We're trying to get all of this work done. So just thought it was important to mention that.
Can we get how much the match would be, what the local match would be if we were to go to bid for Verde with stimulus money?
So that is the $64,000 question, because the stimulus package would come from the Biden administration. They would get to set the rules, and we haven't seen the rules yet. So I don't have anything to offer you. We've asked Carpi, our Washington lobbyist, and they have nothing to share with us at this time. So the answer is it's unknown.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll just offer the comments that first I want to thank Diana for bringing this up. She sent an email to us, and I had read it closely and sent it on to the city manager. And it's great that you're reading the budget so closely and really keeping an eye on where things are going in the city and what we're funding. I think that from the longer perspective of having been sitting in the seat for 6 years, you have these times where there's a lot of public engagement around certain areas in the city. And there was a time when that area was Cardiff. And part of the discussion around the Coastal Rail Trail was the creation of an undercrossing because we were fencing 1.3 miles between Santa Fe and Chesterfield. And so this project is taken a long time to design, but the investment of $900,000 or $1 million and needing another 100,000, I agree with the motion maker, my colleague, Councilmember Mosca, that we shouldn't pull back from that or have that be like wasted money, because the idea of not finishing a project that could have full engineering drawing designs that we could go out and actually build it. I think it's possible and even likely that the Northwest Leucadia project catches up to this one, and we're able to go out together, to pair them together as improvements in the rail corridor. And I think there are all sorts of additional unknowns about, well, what about quiet zones throughout the city? Or what about an additional crossing somewhere else? And those are things that, will emerge. But at this point, what we have in front of us is a lot of I think they call it sunk work, or there's a term like that. That's like, for years and years, we've invested taxpayer money in this, designing this. And so to me, it wouldn't make sense from a fiscal perspective and also from a community enhancement perspective that the fact that the Cardiff community is not coming out today at this consent item, which is a first quarter budget report and proposed amendment, to rally in favor of continuing this project, doesn't mean that that community doesn't care. So, pulling it back today because there's some concern about them being in competition, I really don't think that's the right move. So I would encourage my colleagues to support this relatively small percentage of the total project to get it to that end point, and to allow us to have this project be shovel ready. Just as staff said, the other projects are moving forward, like the third roundabout, and we're trying to get to the stage with Leucadia Streetscape. And if we did get to this stage with Leucadia Streetscape, we wouldn't want to have councils 5 years from now saying we're not going to finish that project or put the last bit of money into it because those people aren't showing up at this meeting to ask for it. I think there is a trust that you have with your community and your elected officials where they are expecting us and trusting us to do that. So I wouldn't feel right about not finishing this, especially with this amount of money that's requested. So I see more hands have gone up. So I'm going to call on Lillian first and then the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make sure that we are clear about the expectation. While the RFP, and I'm very excited that it did go out today, and I can confirm that is an RFP for the North Leucadia preliminary engineering. That is to bring forward the two top candidates under the Cross Connect study with better information about what it will take to bring those in undercrossing to fruition. That does not mean we are anywhere near completion of design. In terms of a completed design, similar to where we are almost with Verde, we are at least 18 months to 2 years to be completed. So I just want to make sure that our expectations regarding what it's going to take are realistic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, and I'm not going to support the motion. It is basically an issue where I don't think we have enough information. This is not a way to allocate money for a project of this size without any clear indication of why do we need to plus this up. I don't recall, the moving of money back and forth. So, I would think that it would be important to have a staff report that detailed why we need this additional money. Is it because there were change orders? Is it because the project had twists and turns that weren't anticipated? They bid for the job and we funded the design of this. And so now I'm not clear on why we're needing to add money to the project. It showed up as a line item in some quarterly budget adjustments. And, yes, I think it should be its own action item agenda. And everybody would be able to read the staff report about why we're doing this. I would hope that we would detail that in the past history, federal grant money is usually about 50% of these projects. So if we go by the El Portal undercrossing, it's about a $13 million project. Let's say 10 for the sake of discussion. That would mean the city would need to come up with 5 million to complete the construction. And you know, I'm not saying that that's not worth it and that Cardiff doesn't deserve it, but I do think that it's important that we have all of the information that's necessary to make an informed decision about whether we're throwing, you know, whether this is the right time to be making this additional, spending these additional dollars on this particular project. And again, accountability to the contractor. What is it that's causing this price to go up?
Can staff answer that question?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So there's roughly 100,000 to finish off the design, and that there is some complications with some utilities. So they have to change the design a little bit for one of the utilities, and there's just a little bit, just the fiscal act of more work to finish up the design proper. We got some good comments back and lessons learned from what happened on El Portal. And so we had quite a bit of comments on their last revision. And so they need to fix the plans based on that as well. So it's you know, it's just very basic plan cleanup to get the project ready for bids.
Did the engineers provide a list of and account for this additional money?
We have a scope and a fee proposal. We went over their scope and fee proposal. We think it's adequate and it's fair, and otherwise we wouldn't be recommending it to you.
I'd like to see it in a staff report, so I can't support moving forward with it.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and call the question.
Okay, so the first vote is on the substitute motion, which is staff recommendation. Councilmember Hensy?
No.
Councilmember Mosca?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kranz?
No.
Mayor Blakespear?
Yes.
Motion fails.
So does staff need any additional direction?
Well, then we go to the original motion.
Oh, okay.
Well, and the original motion is, Councilmember Kranz, was it staff recommendation with the exclusion of the appropriation for Verdi?
Yes.
Wait, can I just ask a question of the motion maker and the seconder? So is what you're proposing that we direct staff to come back with information about this 100,000 that's asked for, and a larger question about rail crossings, or just about what exactly this money's for?
Yeah, I'd like to know what the money's for. And, you know, you can put together a 3-page staff report, give the history and what are the utility changes there? Is it, you know, the gas main, you know, it seems to me that these projects take on a life of their own. And I just think that it's good to document and have in the public record exactly what the need to plus up this project is.
Okay, and can I just ask staff, is it possible to finish the design of this without more money? Because wasn't some of this supposed to be like the buffer, the overflow, if there was additional this or that there was money, you didn't have to come back to council multiple times? Can this project be finished without this money?
No, the project needs some extra money. We think it only needs 100,000. We've asked for 150,000 just in case there's some other unforeseen items, so we wouldn't have to come back for a small amount of money. So, you know, to pare it back, we think we only need about 100,000.
What about if Tony I mean, I think the staff is pretty clear, Tony, and I think it's pretty clear the trajectory and the history, but apparently you don't. So what if you and Kelly sit down with staff over the course of before our next meeting, and then perhaps at that point, we can bring this motion back at the next meeting.
I'd rather not do that. I think that we should have a staff report. It can be on consent. I think we owe it to the public to spell out the details of what this is about. And, I just don't think having this happen in a line item is the right way to do it. There's way too much attention on the rail corridor and the projects that are going along. We've got a little balkanization going on where Cardiff and Leucadia are, there's all this happening. We owe it to the public to provide them the information in a way that everybody can evaluate it. And as a line item in this quarterly adjustment, it doesn't give the public the information that they need. It doesn't seem to me that we're making an informed decision if we approve that. So it's almost as much a philosophical thing about this as it is anything to do with the rail corridor. We should, on big projects like this, we should make sure that we're accountable to the public and have this historic document that says, here's why, here are the issues, this is what it's taking, and here's why it's taking that. And that's why I think that this issue would be much better in a agenda item separate with its own staff report.
I mean, I think partly what you're creating, either intentionally or not, is to have the community of Cardiff come out and say they need to fight for their project and they don't want it taken away from them, and kind of getting angry at us for suggesting that. And so, making it a competition between the communities. And my preference is that we don't do that, we can go ahead and vote on the original motion, but I don't feel like that's useful, because I think it generates distrust, and that we're not having a CIP discussion about one particular project on a consent item or something like, anyway, let's just go ahead and vote on this motion then.
Okay, so just so everyone's clear, the motion is staff recommendation without the Verdi undercrossing line item, and to direct staff to bring back the Verdi undercrossing line item for discussion at a future city council meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
At the next city council meeting?
No.
I just have at a future council meeting.
But we have a really big agenda next week, and we can't add, or next time, we can't just add this item to the next one. So yeah, it has to be out into the future.
Ed, is there a date, or is there a time frame in which you need to get moving on this thing?
So the design, of course, it needs to be shovel ready before the stimulus package hits, because those cities that have projects that are ready, Sandag will award those projects with the grant monies. So it's, the delays, the effects of any delays are unknown, because we don't know if or when any of the stimulus grant monies will become available.
I mean, I would recommend that we have this back on the agenda at the soonest possibility next meeting. So that
what I can share with you is Sandag has been very aggressive about polling all of the cities to get the list of shovel-ready projects together. So we have been very ambitious in turning those in, and Sandag has all of our projects and they're ready. So should this money come down from the federal government, we I guess, maybe wrongfully so, we anticipated that we would have Verdi ready. So we added Verdi to our Sandag list right now. So based on, what I'm hearing, maybe we may have to take Verdi off.
Well, I don't think you need to do that. If you put together a list and forward that information, is this HDR or which engineering firm?
It is not. So it is unknown federal stimulus infrastructure money that is coming from,
No, but I'm talking about who's the engineering firm, and are we really sitting dead in the water?
We are, because we want to sign this next amendment to finish it off. So I don't know, I haven't called, I have to talk to the project engineer to find out how much money is left in the existing contract. So I can't answer, are we stuck like tomorrow or are we stuck next week? I can't answer that.
Tony, what if we allocated this tonight and then they have a report at the next meeting? And if you're not satisfied based on that report at the next meeting, we can allocate, we can find a way of allocating 100,000, some way of taking money from another account to put back into whatever account that you're suggesting.
I'm going to stick with my original motion, and we pull that line item out. We do this on a staff report that gives us all the information that we need to better understand what's going on. The reality is that Leucadia is fighting for their interests, and it's entirely possible. In fact, I might even call it probable that with enough information, I'm going to support it. But this is just not, acceptable to me in terms of, just saying, well, we've already got, 900,000 or whatever it is, $1 million in this, and so we got to throw some more money at it. I want to know what the more money is for.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I hope that if we wait long enough, we would have somebody who would be, and it's not that long, right? But someone who would be representing Cardiff, who would be sitting, here as a fifth vote, which we currently don't have. But, if you think there's a chance, you think that with more information that you would support this, I mean, I don't think this is the right move tonight, but I hope that it seems ridiculous to miss out on this for this 100,000. I mean, I like Joe's idea of if you want to put 100,000 over to Leucadia Streetscape or some other thing as to get your, share for your community, then like, if that's where we're going here, I mean, then I think they need to allocate this. I mean, the city manager has the authority to, what is your authority? Is it up to 100,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, she may have that authority, but we're ultimately responsible. And I just think that this is the responsible way to do it. And you may have a difference of opinion and that you're okay with allocating this extra $150,000, of which maybe 100,000 will be spent. But I think that it's perfectly reasonable to expect more details.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and call the question.
Councilmember Hinsey,
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca,
No.
Deputy Mayor Crayons,
Yes.
Mayor Blakespear.
No.
Motion fails.
So does the city manager want to weigh in on this item and the rest of it? I mean, I guess the first quarter budget report doesn't need approval, right?
So I guess I would suggest kind of a hybrid model. There was an action that you took in the spring that I'm told about. I wasn't here during that time, that transferred the money back into the general fund, which was done. And I think maybe if we provide an overview of that and send it out to council, then we can decide whether or not, as a follow-up to this item, whether or not you think it needs to go on the agenda or whether or not it answers the questions. But other than that, I mean, we can just assume that this item will have to come back at another time.
Okay, well, that sounds like the most reasonable and possible way forward. So that's the end.
And then, Mayor, I just don't know, there's other amendments in that resolution. So I guess.
I mean, they all failed. That was the motion, so.
Right. Okay, then that does conclude the consent calendar.
Okay. Now we're moving on to our action items. So this is our public hearing to consider an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of the final EIR, et cetera, a number of other things, CEQA. I'm not going to read the whole description of it. I will let this staff do that when they do their report. So just to go over the procedure. So the first thing is that the staff report is given, then council discloses any other information, and then there are preliminary questions, and then we go to the appellant and the applicant. So with that, I will turn it over to the staff to give a staff report.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me and can you all see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, council members and members of the public. My name is Anna Kolamusi, and I will be going through the Fox Point Farms appeal of the Planning Commission decision. So the project site, it's located at 1150 Quail Gardens Drive, and it's bounded by Leucadia Boulevard to the south, Sidonia Street to the west, and then Magdalena Ecke Open Space to the north, and Quail Gardens Drive to the east. The site has historically been used as agricultural operations, and it contains a single family home. Just some background, the project site was identified as a housing element site allocated to address the regional housing needs assessment for the city of Encinitas, and it was referred to as Site 09 and the Ector property, and it identified the intent of the developer to construct a 250 unit agri-hood development, and the housing element was certified by HCD on October 8th, 2019. As part of the housing element update, the project was rezoned to the R30 zone, and a portion of it remained in the agriculture zone within the Encinitas Ranch specific plan. So these three images were taken from that specific plan. The map starting on the left shows the sites located within Sidonia East planning area. And then the middle image identifies the limits of the rezoned area to be the R30 zone. And then the image on the right is the conceptual plan that is in the specific plan and was also in the housing element. That's just a conceptual agri-hood development. The discretionary actions are the tentative map, design review permit, and coastal development permit. The action also required the adoption of an environmental impact report, and it was prepared and included a mitigation monitoring and reporting program that addresses measures for transportation, biological resources, cultural tribal resources, geology and soils, and hazardous materials. There was found to be a significant and unavoidable transportation impact as it relates to vehicle miles traveled. I'll be referring to mitigation monitoring program as MMRP and vehicle miles traveled as VMTs. Planning Commission approved a statement of overriding considerations for the project, and this was made based on social, economic, and environmental project benefits, and they're summarized here on this slide. I'm happy to go back to it if needed. A CPP meeting was held on February 27th, 2020, and 90 members of the public attended. The concerns raised are listed on this slide here. And subsequent to that CPP meeting, the applicant met various times with members of the Fox Point community, which is directly west of the project site. And what ultimately came of that is a memorandum of understanding with the project before you this evening. The Planning Commission hearing was held on December 17th, 2020, and there were 11 speakers. 9 spoke in support and 2 in opposition, and the commission unanimously approved the project and certified the EIR and made the statement of overriding considerations. A timely appeal was filed by Encinitas Community Trust, who you'll hear from this evening. Mediation was offered to the applicant. However, there was already mediation in process, and they wished to continue those efforts outside of the city's process. I'm going to dive into the appeal issues that were brought up. The first one was in regards to the uncertainty of the appeal process, both during COVID as well as the city hall holiday closures. They also indicated that the documentation was not available to seniors. So as you would see in your staff report, there is a provision in the Encinitas Municipal Code that does extend the time limit to the next business day to allow that additional time needed to confirm the process, to ensure that the appeal is filed in a timely manner. And so that provision is available to the public to ensure that there's plenty of time for that We maintained the process in which we provide contact information on our legal notice that has been in, that we have had during this COVID process since it all started. And so we did have that information available, and then the data was posted on our city's website 72 hours in advance of the meeting. The second appeal issue relates to the statement that there was a lack of proper cumulative analysis, an improper conclusion that there's a less than significant adverse impact, which improperly identified appropriate mitigation measures. So the EIR prepared followed all required CEQA guidelines, and it actually assumed worst case scenario. In particular, the housing element sites were not required to be included in the CEQA cumulative analysis. However, they were included in that, and that's one example of the worst case scenario and how the EIR was reviewed. The appellant actually listed a list of projects that stated that they were not accurately represented in the cumulative analysis. However, it was explained that the names of those projects were changed from what they were called in the housing element as opposed to when they actually submitted with the city. So that was clarified. So we felt that the mitigation measures were properly vetted and found adequate and consistent with CEQA requirements. The next issue was that the EIR did not include substantial evidence to support the finding that no additional mitigation measures were required. One of those was in relation to providing a shuttle service, and then the other stating that the alternatives did not consider the removal of the commercial restaurant component. So the second part of the commercial restaurant, I'll respond to in later slides. Before I directly respond to the shuttle, I just wanted to make a few statements. One of them as it relates to the statement that the significance threshold was 1,000 average daily trips. And we just wanted to make sure that the 1,000 average daily trips is the determination of whether or not a project is required to conduct a VMT analysis. And so that it's not apples to apples in that scenario. So I just wanted to make sure that we clarified that point. And then I thought that it was noteworthy to disclose a brief overview how CEQA views mitigation measures. And that is that they must be feasible and enforceable. And I have the definition here of feasibility, which was utilized. And so in response to adding the shuttle as a mitigation measure, it was found that the shuttles are most effective in higher density areas, and that this project scale was not large enough to generate sufficient day-long demand for a shuttle. In addition, there was a vehicle operations and queuing analysis, which still also considered the shuttle option, but there was no literature that was found that would support the effectiveness of having that shuttle, and they could not be quantified. Moving on to the next appellant issue, which stated that they thought that the EIR needed to be recirculated, specifically in relation to 2 documents being missing from the EIR. So after receiving public comments, a land evaluation and site assessment, which is a LESA study, was conducted based on those comments received. And the results concluded the project was not considered a significant agricultural resource under CEQA. So this further provided that substantial evidence needed to support the findings that were already made in the EIR. So then after that, the LESA was incorporated as an appendix. But under CEQA, if no new or more severe environmental impacts are determined, then a recirculation of an EIR is actually not required. In regards to the climate action plan update, CEQA also states that the policies and regulations in place at the time of the notice of preparation is published. Those are the ones that are required. So in the case of the climate action plan, it was approved in November of 2020, and the NOP was published March 2020. So the EIR was not required to address the climate action plan. However, the project is consistent with that 2020 climate action plan. Now going back to the statement that the project alternatives did not consider the removal of the restaurant to reduce the VMTs. So the only significant impact that was found for the project was for VMTs, and removing the restaurant would not reduce the impact below a level of significance. However, it's noteworthy to state that the agri-hood development without the commercial in the restaurant doesn't meet the project objectives. Appeal 6 relates to the stance that the city has a misunderstanding of how substantial evidence works and that the lack of required substantial evidence violates CEQA. It further states that the city improperly burdens the public to provide the substantial evidence. So the EIR does include the required substantial evidence to demonstrate that, as I stated prior, once the public comments are received, then it's the city's responsibility to look at the EIR to make sure that the substantial evidence is there. And the example of providing that LESA was something that, again, went ahead and further supported the findings of the EIR. And the findings of fact had all the substantial evidence, and then based on the comments received, city staff and the city's EIR consultant did not find any evidence that needed to be further analyzed. And then we further looked at the comments that were received in relation to mitigation measures. And again, if they're not feasible and enforceable, that's why they were not included as part of mitigation measures. So the last issue is basically for the appellant requesting that you vacate and reverse the Planning Commission December 20th certification of the EIR. And in response to that, staff's recommendation is that you uphold the Planning Commission's decision. But before that, I wanted to state that after the agenda report was published, there were 47 public comments that came in support of the project, in support of the Fox Point Farms project, and supporting the denial of the appeal. And then one letter that stated that they did not wish to state a position of support or not, but they did make statements about the concession incentive requests. So with that, that concludes my presentation. We do have the EIR consultant to answer some more of the technical questions if needed, as well as city staff. We have from engineering, San Diego Water District, traffic, planning, myself. So if you have questions, as well as Hans from the fire division. So that concludes my presentation and we're available for questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Councilmember Mosca.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Anna, for that presentation. My question is about the restaurant, and just wondering out loud here, if we're looking at a restaurant, say on El Camino Real or parts of Santa Fe or Encinitas, there's not really connections to those restaurants from some of the residential areas, and for the most part, people have to drive to those restaurants, and there's ample parking, especially along El Camino Real, so it's really kind of inviting to drive to some of those restaurants along that strip. But when we're looking at a restaurant that's kind of embedded in a neighborhood and has connections to even some of the adjacent neighborhoods, how do we analyze that in terms of vehicle miles traveled?
So I will defer to the professionals. I see Bob Stark is on the line. I'll go ahead and mute myself.
Thank you, Anna. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Bob Stark from Michael Baker International. We prepared the EIR on behalf of the city. To answer your question, Councilman Mosca, the restaurant as part of the development actually helps to reduce that VMT number, the vehicle miles traveled that we talked about. In our planning circles, this is, we talk about mixed use a lot, and I know the Planning Commission and Council has seen mixed use projects. And this is something I think the city strives for because it captures those trips internally. And I think that's what you're talking about. If folks live in a neighborhood where they can walk to a restaurant, I know I would prefer that as most people here would. So in those complicated traffic models where we are determining the total vehicle miles travel and per capita miles traveled per person and employee and things of that nature, having those amenities built into a project does factor into that model and helps reduce those miles traveled because you're providing amenities that people want and need within a walkable community.
So so that was the rationale and the reason that if you took it out, it didn't make all that much of a difference.
Correct.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So now we go to any other information received that is not in the staff report. So I'll start with Councilmember Mosca.
So there were some emails that were circulating at one time that Deputy Mayor Kranz and I were on. And so I received a series of emails from the appellant. I've never responded to the emails, and I'm not sure why I was on the emails, but I did want to disclose that I did receive a series of emails at one time, what appeared to be some sort of negotiation between the appellant and the applicant, but never met the appellant, never spoke with the appellant, and that's about it. So nothing to disclose beyond those emails.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kranz.
I have had a number of meetings with residents of the Fox Point neighborhood. They go back so far as that it wasn't quite pre-COVID, it was just starting though, and we sat in a driveway physically distanced, and I heard from a number of neighbors there. Since then, there have been a couple of Zoom sessions with residents concerned about a variety of issues. In each of these meetings, I made it clear that I might have to sit in a quasi-judicial role. And so I was there to listen. And I highly encouraged folks to work with the developer to make sure that the developer was aware of their concerns. And I know that they all did that. And I know that the developer was fairly responsive to many of their concerns, not all of them, but a vast majority of them, because many of the people that I met with have since sent emails in support of the project. And I also sat in on a Zoom session with the appellant and their counsel and the developers, plus a couple of city staff members. Again, in that case, I mostly listened with to keep an open mind. And I recently had communication with the developers council by telephone. So those were my contacts.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hensy.
Councilmember Krantz, I received a high volume of emails from the neighbors on Sedonia Street, and this was prior to the appeal, prior to the project going forward to Planning Commission. And like Tony, I listened, but mostly just provided the contact information for the developer. The developer, Brian Grover, is somebody who I know through the community, through his work with Bike Walk Encinitas and his role as a traffic and public safety commissioner. But aside from having watched the Planning Commission hearing on this topic, I haven't received any other information that wasn't included as part of this record.
Okay, thank you. I also know the developer through all the community ways that were just mentioned and received a large volume of emails. I also had a phone call with the developers council, and that's all I have to disclose. So let's see. Now we go to opening the public hearing. Open. Now the appellant goes first for 10 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Anna, for putting up the slides. My name is Paul Kybell. I'm here representing Encinitas Community Trust, whose members include residents both from the neighborhood Fox Point immediately adjacent to where the development is and also residents from neighborhoods all around Encinitas. I'm co-counsel for Encinitas Community Trust. I work with Water and Power Law Group, which is a law firm I'll mention, and working there, I've worked on CEQA issues, both in terms of compliance and litigation for the past 20 years. I also am a full professor at Golden Gate University Law School in San Francisco, where I teach California environmental law, a course which focuses on the California Environmental Quality Act, and I've taught that for the past 10 years. So if you can go to the second slide, please, Anna. Thank you. So I tried to sort of distill this down into one slide to make it sort of easy. I know I have 10 minutes. I won't be able to hit all of these issues, but I'll try to hit some of the main ones. I think what we face here is a situation that is not uncommon with CEQA, which is where you have a project that has a lot of good positive attributes. It truly does, but it also has some very significant adverse environmental impacts. And I mentioned this at the beginning because this appeal is not about whether you support, or at least from my client's point of view, is not about whether they support or whether they oppose the project. And this appeal is not about whether it's a good project or a bad project. The appeal is about whether the environmental analysis done for this project violates CEQA. That's the issue that is the basis for our appeal. Encinitas Community Trust recognizes that there are some very laudable and positive aspects to this project, and I'll just mention two. One, the designation of 40 units for very low income residents is a very positive aspect to this project. There are also very positive aspects in terms of allowing public open space and access to it that we think are very commendable and that ECT supports. But the problem is that there are many environmental impacts from this project that are significant, that were not disclosed and were not mitigated. And CEQA is not a law that balances overall, is it a good project or a bad project? CEQA is a law that requires the disclosure of significant adverse environmental impacts and requires the identification of mitigation, and that's what we think is lacking. In terms of sort of cross-cutting issues, as Anna mentioned, our view in looking at the comments that the city provided, the response to comments on the DEIR, and also looking even at the agenda staff report, is that there does appear to be a misunderstanding in some regard as to what the substantial evidence standard is. There were at least 7 or 8 occasions in the city's response to comments where they noted that they did not believe that Encinitas Community Trust had come forward with substantial evidence to support that there was a more than significant impact. And that same phrase was used at least twice in the staff report. That is not the standard in CEQA. CEQA does not require that the public come forth with evidence to support that there is more than significant adverse impacts. It requires that the lead agency that prepared the EIR provide evidence, substantial evidence, to support its finding that it's less than significant. So once again, we think that's been a problem. But more importantly was this issue of cumulative impacts. That CEQA requires that you not just look at the impacts, the environmental impacts of your project, but that you consider those of similar projects in the region that have similar impacts. And we really believe that the failure to conduct proper cumulative impact analysis, you can list the projects, but if you don't actually do the analysis and quantify it, is what is lacking and is what led the city to make these findings. I'm not going to be able to hit all of these, so I'm just going to try to hit 4 because I think that realistically, time-wise, that's all I can get to. In terms of regional water supply impacts, the EIR that was prepared really based its analysis on the urban water management plan that was prepared in 2015 by the San Dieguito Water District, in which they indicated, this is all in the EIR, that for the next 10 years, and from 2015 to 2025, that they had enough capacity for about 2,800 new residents. And the analysis in the EIR said, hey, our project's only 650 residents. That's only 24% of 2,800. We're okay. We pointed out that even since 2015, there have been so many projects that have been approved or that are now being proposed, that when you look cumulatively at all the projects, they've already blown past that 2,800 resident. So therefore, the threshold that the city relied upon, when you factor in cumulative impacts, has already been transgressed, which is why we believe that the finding that there is not substantial evidence to support the finding that the project will not have significant adverse impacts on regional water supplies. And we think that there are measures that can be taken to mitigate that. None of that was examined. In terms of greenhouse gases, once again, the EIR itself disclosed that on an annual basis, there would be about 1,800 metric tons of additional greenhouse gas carbon emissions. Let's factor that out even 20 years for the project. That would be about 36,000 metric tons of carbon. And for residential projects, they usually use a 40-year time frame. So that would be 72,000 metric tons of greenhouse gases generated by this project. And yet, notwithstanding those really high figures, 36,000, 72,000, the EIR said, we find that there's no significant impact on greenhouse gas emissions. Now, one of the reasons they found that is that they relied in their response to comments on a November 2020 change to the climate action plan. None of that was disclosed in the EIR that was circulated to the public. This relates to the failure to recirculate. Based on the information that they provided in the EIR, those thresholds have been transgressed. And once again, we think there are many ways to mitigate it, including simply purchasing carbon offsets. None of that was analyzed because they found that there was no impacts. The last specific environmental impact I'll talk about given time, is traffic impacts. There was a concession in the EIR that there would be significant traffic impacts, but they found that they were unmitigable, that there was unavoidable, that there was nothing that could be done to reduce them. And I'd like to focus in on the shuttle, because up here in Northern California, we have at least 2 examples of where those shuttles have been used. They're used in Oakland, it's called the Freebie, it's the Broadway shuttle. And in the area of Emeryville, which is north of there, there's something called the Emery-Go-Round. And both of those free shuttles introduced by developers for residents are used to reduce VMTs. And what we indicated is that if you want to actually reduce the greenhouse gases and the impacts on climate change, so that you can actually implement your climate action plan, you should have given more serious consideration to the use of a shuttle, and in particular, a shuttle that would help get the local school residents that are in there to the local public elementary and middle schools. And when they say that there's no data to support that, that's because they didn't look. There is an enormous amount of data out there about the use of such shuttles like the Freebie and like the Emery-Go-Round. And the fact that they didn't look for it, I don't think will hold up. The last thing I'll mention as time winds down relates to the failure to recirculate. As I mentioned, in their response to comments trying to justify their greenhouse gas analysis, in the response to comments, the city relied on the November 2020 climate action plan. I agree with Anna. The mere fact that it was released doesn't mean it triggers recirculation. And if the city hadn't relied on it, it doesn't need to be recirculated for comment. But the city in its comments tried to ground and defend its finding of less than significant impacts on what happened in that November 2020 change to the climate action update. And because they relied on it, we feel that recirculation of the EIR was required. Similarly, in regard to farmland loss impacts, we explained that the California Department of Conservation had designated the entire site as unique farmland. The DEIR stated that they didn't think that they thought that the designation by the California Department of Conservation was incorrect, and that therefore it could be ignored and it wasn't unique farmland and therefore it didn't need to be mitigated. Well, after we commented on that, it wasn't until the response to comments that they then revealed and included a copy of an analysis that they had done as to what supported that. But none of that was included in what was submitted to the public. So we believe those 2 pieces of information, given how they were used by the city, constitute significant new information and a failure to recirculate. And then lastly, there's the issue of when the DEIR and the public notice was provided, the only information provided about how to review the document was saying that you can come into the city clerk's office. And that notice was issued a week after the city and the county issued a stay-at-home order saying, don't go out. So we immediately said, you know, if you have electronic versions of this, you need to recirculate the public notice so that people that can't get out can review the documents. Because if they can't review the documents, they can't participate meaningfully in the hearing.
That's your 10 minutes.
Okay, so I'll wrap it up here and say that we believe that the failure in the public notice to provide information on how people could electronically access the documents violated not only CEQA's requirements, but as we've looked at it, we think it actually violated the American with Disability Act. So what we're urging is that, you know, either that you set aside and vacate and ask them to go back and do the EIR so the project can go forward. We're not trying to stop the project, but the fact that there are many wonderful parts to the project and positive parts, and we agree, doesn't somehow remedy the really glaring CEQA violations associated with this document. So if you go ahead and deny this appeal and uphold the certification, what you're actually doing is forcing that legal challenge as opposed to sending it back to the Planning Commission so that they
Mr.
can
Kibble, thank you very much. You'll have 5 minutes of rebuttal.
That's fine.
You know, we try to keep within the time so that everybody has a fair amount of time.
I understand. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so now we have the applicant who goes next for 10 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. We'll begin. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Brian Grover, and I am the managing partner of Nolan Communities and a 14-year Leucadia resident. With me tonight is my partner, Sean Kilkenny, and our attorney, Marco Gonzalez. We are excited to bring our project before you for your consideration, particularly after receiving unanimous approval from the Planning Commission. While we are here due to an unfortunate appeal of that decision by 2 neighbors, we would like to thank so many in the Encinitas community for their unwavering support over the past 3 years. We will keep tonight's presentation brief given the time constraints and the nature of this hearing as an appeal. We do, however, want to provide both you and the public with a modified version of our prior Planning Commission presentation, particularly for the benefit of those who did not watch the Planning Commission hearing. Sean, you might be muted here.
Got it. We know that development in Encinitas can be a scary thing. Recognizing this, we first met with a group of Fox Point neighbors in 2017. And after hearing the concerns voiced at our CPP meeting, we worked directly with them to address those concerns over the past 9 months. We sincerely want to thank the 76 residents of the Fox Point community who have chosen to work with us since March to improve our project and minimize its impacts on nearby residents. They've helped us improve our project in several meaningful ways, which are all detailed on this slide. While those discussions weren't always easy, we worked through a lot of issues with the neighbors, and we were able to create a better project as a result. We're here on appeal because there are a couple of people in the neighborhood who oppose the project as proposed. We've done our best to try to understand their concerns and believe the proposed extraordinary benefits we've offered beyond what is required under CEQA reflect a good faith attempt to address those concerns and make this the best development proposal the city has seen. One thing we'd like to focus on is our commitment to the agri-hood concept, one we developed and proposed for Fox Point Farms more than 3 years ago. As part of our 2017 proposal to City Council, we prepared a concept plan and summary of the agri-hood concept that included certain specific commitments, including the provision of an organic farm, quality amenities for residents and the public, a mix of housing typologies to encourage diversity, a farm subsidy, a limit of 250 residential units, and a full discretionary review process, including CEQA. Not only have we stayed true to all those original commitments, but we worked hard to improve upon the original concept. The 2018 site plan consolidated non-residential uses, the restaurant and event space, to the east to make them more accessible to the public. And with the evolution to our final site plan in 2020, we focused on spatial improvements to the farm, agricultural amenity area, recreation center, and building typologies. Both the 2017 and 2018 site plans consisted predominantly of 3-story buildings. In 2020, we were able to reduce 60% of our residential buildings to 2 stories in response to what we were hearing from the neighborhood. Consistent across all 3 site plans has been a broad diversity of housing types ranging from very low income deed restricted apartments to for sale cottage homes.
These next few slides show some early renderings we provided back in 2017. These highlight just how similar our current design is to those initial renderings. This first slide shows the cottage homes along the western portion of the site and the edible paseo fronting Sidonia Street. This slide shows the barn in the background and a public serving amenity space in the foreground. The 2020 design moved the farm stand indoors in the first level of the barn building. This slide again shows the barn. Our current design provides for community gardens in the central amenity area, and the area in front of the barn consists of seating and community gathering areas, a children's play area, landscaping, and a community green. This rendering shows the interior of the restaurant inside the barn building. Again, the intent of these slides is to show that while significant refinements and improvements have been made, what we have brought before you tonight is very much consistent with our original proposal back in 2017, which was the basis for the site's inclusion in the city's housing element update.
The site plan design and architecture are driven by our desire to honor the agricultural history of Encinitas, the Encinitas Ranch, and this property. The inclusion of an on-site restaurant, farm stand, and event space are what will connect the residential uses to the agricultural uses, bringing the community together and giving residents the opportunity to live, work, shop, and play on-site. It's also worth noting that all these uses were contemplated as part of our initial concept and are included in the description of this property contained in the Encinitas Ranch specific plan.
One of the things we are most proud of is the project's design as a complete community with true socioeconomic integration through the provision of a diversity of housing types. Most high-density housing projects provide one type of housing, usually apartments, and might have some different unit sizes, but largely they're all very similar. At Fox Point Farms, we have been very intentional about doing quite the opposite. Our community includes varying sizes of traditional flats, townhomes, carriage homes, and cottage homes. The for sale homes drive affordability by providing everything you need in a compact home and nothing you don't, and provide for the unique option of a detached home in a high density community. By embracing the notion of affordability by design, we believe these high efficiency homes will offer opportunities for home ownership that do not currently exist in Encinitas. In addition to the wide variety of housing types, we are exceeding the city's inclusionary housing requirement and providing those deed restricted homes at the very low income category rather than the low income category. We will be providing 40 deed restricted, very low income apartment homes, while the city's inclusionary housing policy only requires 25. Our deed restricted apartments will be fully integrated into the community, spread out amongst every single market rate apartment building, and will have full access to the community's assortment of on-site amenities. The Fox Point Farms community will promote sustainability through a site design that will conserve energy, water, open space, and other natural resources. As part of this commitment, the project will implement core sustainability features, including those shown on the screen, which have been incorporated as project design features. These sustainability features substantially exceed those required by the city's climate action plan and set the bar for future community development in Encinitas.
When we put it all together, we believe we've met our goal all along, to create a community that the city can be proud of. This aerial image shows the project site today as a full commercial agricultural operation. The Fox Point Farms project provides a unique opportunity to shift the agricultural uses from private commercial production to a more community-oriented agricultural use. From the start, we've been committed to an open, honest, and transparent review process, both with the city and the community. As mentioned previously, we committed to a full discretionary review process and a full analysis of the project's environmental impacts through completion of an environmental impact report. While we could have utilized a by right approval process and been exempt from CEQA, we stayed true to our commitment. Ironically, it's our voluntary commitment to a transparent CEQA process as the basis for tonight's appeal.
We appreciate the Planning Commissioner's thorough consideration of the project and its potential impacts and mitigation measures, as well as their certification of CEQA compliance. As mentioned earlier, we are here tonight because 2 neighbors have appealed that decision. In response to the appeal, we submitted a letter to you last Wednesday, which included our formal response to each of the issues raised by the appellant. In the interest of time, we will not go through our formal position on each of those issues, but to summarize, we are confident that the final EIR addresses each and every one of their claims, very similar to what you heard in the staff report. We are confident in this because the Encinitas Community Trust did not raise any new substantive issues in its appeal that had not already been raised and addressed as part of the final EIR. To be completely honest, we're a bit discouraged at this point. We spent a lot of time working directly with the Fox Point community, those 76 neighbors that we mentioned earlier, and we addressed concerns that would impact those residents directly. A majority of that community supports us because of those efforts. The city's EIR analysis is thorough and based on substantial evidence, and no additional mitigation measures are required. Our project exceeds the city's affordable housing requirement by 40%, while at the same time building to the minimum number of units allowed under the housing element to ensure consistency with community character. We have provided an amenity package and public serving uses that will create a true sense of place for the community, a sense of place that Chairman Ehlers of the Planning Commission likened to the Olivenhain Town Hall. We believe this project embodies everything that Encinitas stands for, respecting the past and moving into the future, a commitment to community-supported agriculture, housing diversity, quality design, placemaking, sustainability. Nonetheless, we are here tonight under appeal. As Sean mentioned earlier, we have attempted to understand the appellant's concerns, and based on that, we have proposed that special conditions be added to the project, providing for a suite of additional extraordinary benefits to truly make this project one of a kind in responding to those stated concerns. Those additional extraordinary benefits include substantial commitments to purchasing carbon offsets, as mentioned by the appellant earlier, agricultural conservation easements, funding and operating a project shuttle to take students living at Fox Point Farms to school, and a commission study by the Water District to identify new water supplies and promote conservation and water reuse. We hope to move forward with the project with these added benefits included.
Brian, that is your 10 minutes.
Okay, we'll stop here. I'll just leave this slide up. These are just 3 points of clarification that we wanted to raise at this meeting. If you have questions on this later, we're happy to explain. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just reading through this last slide.
Yeah, when is most appropriate? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we received an email about these additional offers of conditions. So maybe you can cover those in the 5-minute appeal, or sorry, 5-minute conclusion that you have.
That works. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so now let's go to the public speakers.
All right, Mayor, we do have 4. The first speaker is Dolores Welty. I do not see Dolores. Let's see. I do not see Dolores in the queue. How about, let's see, Bob Kent. Bob, you can go. You have 3 minutes. You can start when you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Bob Kent, Encinitas resident and a member of Keys for Homes. We are local residents who advocate for the building of affordable homes in Encinitas, and we urge you to affirm the Planning Commission's approval of the Fox Point Farms community by denying the appeal presented tonight for 2 reasons. Firstly, on December 17th, the Planning Commission had a full and thorough vetting of the proposed Fox Point Farms community and unanimously approved this project by concluding that it has been found to be consistent with the general plan, Encinitas Ranch Specific Plan, Municipal Code, State Density Bonus Law, CEQA guidelines, and all development standards related to the R30 zoning. Secondly, the Fox Point Farms community is the first site on the housing element list to be presented to the Planning Commission and now City Council. And it sets a very well deserved high standard for what a successful new community in Encinitas can look like by providing 40 very low income affordable apartments and actually exceeding the city requirement of 25 affordable apartments. Equally important, Brian Grover and his team demonstrated a commitment to neighborhood collaboration, innovative project design, and environmental sustainability, including its dedication of open space amenities, 5.5 acre working organic farm, a bike share program for all residents at no additional cost to the lower income residents, its LEED Gold certification, and its proximity to school services and transit. We should do our fair share to address our region's housing affordability crisis, which impacts millennials and young professionals, working families, seniors on a fixed income, and especially for our essential workers who earn between $15 to $20 an hour and are commuting long distances or finding difficult living situations in order to stay here in the city where they work and serve. Fox Point Farms will help move the needle by providing much needed affordable housing and is a unique, innovative, and welcome addition to our community. Please affirm the unanimous Planning Commission approval and deny this appeal. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ron Dodge. Ron, you can start when you are ready.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you. I'm very supportive of the Fox Point Farms. I heard about the agrihood concept back in November of 2017 when there was a Housing Element Task Force and City Council meeting. The idea was intriguing, but the first rendering was absolutely breathtaking. And it was a very refreshing concept of a complete community. We are a community that's passionate about community character. And what better way to honor our community character than this homage to our cherished agricultural heritage. Agriculture is the very essence of our community. And agrihood is a spectacular way to continue honoring that essence with a much needed housing, with open spaces that are farming and country and nature. Fox Point Farms is community character. Our city is also intensely interested in nurturing and sustaining small businesses. And we have the opportunity to enable a second generation farmer to continue with his farming. Fox Point Farms enables the family farm to continue operation in the future, saving a small business. It also provides 250 residential units, 210 are market rate, 40 are very low affordable units. That's something that most of the proposed solutions are generally is low income, as opposed to very low. Again, it's agriculturally oriented neighborhood. Farms are skillfully incorporating agricultural heritage and with the themed residences, community services, and open space. It does so at a substantially reduced density from the allowed by right condition, further contributing to the farm community character. Fox Point agrihood concept is a model for future development in our community. It sets the bar for complete communities and as a vision throughout our city for our dated aging brick and mortar commercial corridors and for continually challenged commercial agricultural areas. I look forward to seeing more developments of this nature and how the concept might be adapted to a variety of situational challenges. Thank you. And in particular for El Camino Real.
And then our final speaker is Douglas Shaw.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. My name is Douglas Shaw. I'm a 35-year resident of Leucadia and lived on Sidonia Street in Fox Point for the past 20 years. I'm also speaking on behalf of my neighbors, Angelica Pedler, Laura Lynn Sheeran, Tom Warden, and Joe Boyle. We have been actively involved in negotiations with Nolan Communities to help make changes to the Fox Point Farms agri-hood design to mitigate environmental, traffic, and other design issues that we see as potentially having negative impact on our existing neighborhood. Through open dialogue and compromise together with the developer, we've been able to effect changes to their plans that we believe go far in helping preserve the character of our neighborhood and our quality of life. None of us want to have a development of 250 new homes with the traffic and the environmental concerns it will create, yet I do recognize that the development will happen soon on the Ector property. We do need more affordable housing here in Encinitas, and we're mandated to do so. Fox Point Farms is an attractive, well-planned first step. My neighbors and I are gravely concerned that if the current appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of the EIR and Fox Point Farms development by Encinitas Community Trust is successful, it will lead to prolonged litigation. If that happens, I feel it will likely force the developer into an untenable situation with increased demands, cost, and time, forcing them to cancel the current project and resubmit a new plan, and then use their by right exemption from CEQA, where none of us would have the opportunity for public input. We could have 500 plus rental units versus the minimum 250 units of mixed housing as currently designed, and exponential impacts to traffic in our environment. I wish I could have spoken directly to my neighbors in Encinitas Trust to discuss these concerns as I normally would, but via a letter, it was requested by their lawyer that all communication should go through him. So without a direct conduit, I have a few questions I'd appreciate them answering via this forum. First and foremost, what is really an ECT's ultimate goal? It's hard for us to understand. On their GoFundMe page, it states that the goal is not to stop the project. If that's the case, do they recognize the very real and dangerous possibility that their efforts may force the developer to scrap the current plan and redesign a larger, more dense project with more than double the units that would present a much larger problem? Is that what ECT wants? I ask instead, how can Encinitas Community Trust help us not do away with the currently designed project, which is acknowledged by the Planning Commission and most of our community as an exemplary project that integrates well within our community and neighborhood? We could end up with another 7-story Goodson project nightmare that is unpopular with most in the community. Is that what they want? I appreciate the time and energy ECT is putting into the effort to try and help protect our community. That said, I implore Encinitas Community Trust, the City of Encinitas, and Nolan Communities to avoid litigation. Sit down and work together civilly with the community to negotiate, compromise, do whatever is necessary to arrive at a solution that preserves our environment, meets local and state guidelines on affordable housing and density, while maintaining the current number of units and the agri-hood design of Fox Point Farms. Thank you for the time to speak to you, and thanks for your service.
That concludes speakers, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the speakers who called in. We received so many emails, I thought we would have a lot of speakers. Let me go back to what's next. It's
rebuttal by the applicant.
Yeah, applicant gets 5 minutes and then appellant gets 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Council members. We'd like to have our attorney, Marco Gonzalez, address the rebuttal items.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Marco Gonzalez with Coast Law Group on behalf of Nolan. The Encinitas Community Trust raised a number of issues in their presentation, and I'm going to try to run through them very quickly. I'd like to start off with greenhouse gas. You know, Mr. Kaibel mentioned the emissions that would result from the development of this project and others under the housing element. But what he didn't do was talk about the methodology that was utilized in the appendix attached to the draft EIR to get at the determination that the emissions would be less in significance. The fact is the applicant has utilized the industry standard to do a site-specific analysis and find that there would be no significant impact. Simply stating that there would be emissions at whatever level doesn't get into the detail of the modeling that was utilized and the analysis that was done in that document. And so it doesn't undermine the finding of no significant impact. Further, the simple reflection in the 2020 cap that all of the housing element update sites can be accommodated without exceeding the city's target for greenhouse gas emissions simply confirms what was already found in the draft EIR. It doesn't identify new mitigation measures or new impacts, and therefore doesn't trigger recirculation. Now, the same can be said for the LISA analysis that was conducted in response to the comments that the loss of unique farmland would be a significant impact. The fact that we did additional work to show that it wouldn't be a significant impact does not trigger recirculation. CEQA law is very clear that only if you add new mitigation measures or you have new information that suggests that impacts would be greater than expected, do you need to recirculate your document. Now, this brings us to the shuttle. Mr. Kybell talks about the Oakland shuttle, the Emeryville shuttle. And what's interesting about both of those shuttles is that they are both predicated upon both funding and management by transportation districts. There are business improvement districts that fund those shuttles. Those shuttles are so fundamentally different that they would never relate to a 250 unit apartment complex being obligated to provide a shuttle on its own. What's most important is that there's nothing in the record to suggest that operating a shuttle at the Fox Point Farms development would result in VMT reductions such that it would have any meaningful impact on the finding of significance that leads to the statement of overriding considerations. Now, this is important because Mr. Kybell would like you to believe that simply because we've offered to do a shuttle, that shows that it's feasible. That economic feasibility to do a shuttle that may or may not result in VMT reductions overall is not the same as legal feasibility, which is what is required by CEQA in order for the city to have the ability to impose that as a mitigation measure. Now, the discussion that we started off with in Mr. Kybell's presentation about substantial evidence is relevant here, because we do have substantial evidence from an expert in Appendix O-3 that suggests that we cannot do a shuttle in a legally feasible manner. In order for that to even come into question, at the very least, Mr. Kybell has to do something more than say, yeah, but up here in Northern California, we've done it twice. You have to actually provide something that would be reliable to the city council, substantial evidence-based, that you could say, these are the VMT reductions that would occur. And frankly, they haven't borne their burden to put that level of information into the record. Nonetheless, Nolan wants this to be the best project, wants it to be as successful as possible, so it's willing to step forward and provide a shuttle program that would be novel to the city, and if it works, we'll even expand it. But at this point, it can't be required as mitigation. I think finally that brings us to the water district issue. You know, when you guys approved the housing element update, there was an environmental assessment that was conducted at that time, and the San Diego Water District was asked to opine on its ability to meet the needs of those housing element update R30 overlay sites that were within its jurisdiction, and it said that it could do that. In conjunction with the draft environmental impact review, it made the finding that it could meet the needs of the city in a dry year, in multiple dry years, and in regular years. While Mr. Kybell would like to speculate on the population growth that has occurred since the Urban Water Management Plan discussed capacity needs, again, the ECT has provided nothing in the record to substantiate this speculation as to how many people have come to the city of Encinitas since that Urban Water Management Plan was approved. So that being said, Nolan, recognizing that, hey, we want to be good stewards, we want to be good neighbors, we're willing to put forward $75,000 to the San Diego Water District, not as mitigation, but as an exceptional public benefit so that they can study whether there are other places that they can get water. Now, we know they buy all of their water from the County Water Authority, so finding new water could be really hard in our community, but we also would put money towards them doing conservation efforts like turf reduction or purchasing rain barrels for ratepayers. All of this, again, reflecting Nolan's commitment to provide really the best project that the city has ever seen or probably will see under the housing element update sites.
Marco, that is your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
If you wanted to conclude with a 1 minute sentence or something, you could have it. The appellant ran over a little bit, and I think that would be fair for you if you wanted it.
Thank you. You know, we hit all the 4 issues. We would simply say that these issues are all addressed in the response to comments. There's nothing new that's been brought up, and we respectfully request that you deny the appeal as recommended by staff.
Okay, thank you. So now we have the appellant for 5 minutes. We cannot hear you, Mr. Kybell.
There we go. I didn't want to talk over Marco. So in my 5 minutes, I'll just try to touch on a couple issues. One is that in the presentation by the developer, Nolan, several times they mentioned that this appeal was being filed by 2 people. There are many more members than 2 that constitute the Encinitas Community Trust, and they come not only from people within the neighborhood immediately adjacent to it, from neighborhoods, but they come from neighborhoods around the entire city. So that representation and characterization of the group by Nolan was simply inaccurate. But I think what I actually wanted to speak to in closing was I thought the remarks made by Douglas Shaw were really on point and really excellent, which is that we have a project here that has many, many fine elements in terms of design and affordable housing. And that the question is, how do we figure out a way for that project to go forward? And how do we do that in a way that avoids litigation? I think that was Douglas Shaw's point. And I want to agree with him. But what seems to be misunderstood here is that the real obstacle to Fox Point Farms project going forward, this project that has many fine elements, is that the EIR that was prepared for it is woefully inadequate and fails to disclose and mitigate several very important adverse environmental impacts related to water, related to traffic, related to greenhouse gas supplies. And that if you tonight, as the City Council, go ahead and validate that EIR, you are actually causing the greatest jeopardy to this project. Whereas if you go back to the Planning Commission and you go back and say, you need to redo this EIR so that we appropriately disclose and mitigate it, that is actually what keeps this project going forward. ECT is not interested in litigating this project, in filing a lawsuit. ECT is interested in actually just making sure that the adverse impacts are mitigated. But if you go ahead tonight and do this and post it, you start a 35-day clock that forces ECT to litigate. Whereas if you send it back to the Planning Commission and say, we simply need to redo the EIR and clean this up so these things are mitigated, then Douglas Shaw's vision of how this should work, not with litigation, not with adversity, but with sitting down, acknowledging the shortcomings and solving them, that's the result. So I feel like that has been lost a little bit tonight, where the talk has been about what a fine project it is. But all the elements of what a fine project it is don't cure the shortcomings in terms of what CEQA requires. And CEQA is not a popularity contest about how many people or how many people voted. It's whether you disclose significant impacts and mitigated them. And we want to work with the developer and we want to work with the city to do that. But if you go ahead and recertify the EIR, you're setting this on a course that actually undermines the project. And we hope you don't do that. So with that, I'll conclude.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Krantz.
Yes, thank you. What a long, strange trip it's been. This effort to get a housing element certified and approved, and you know, years of back and forth. And I can remember the initial presentation when this particular project was proposed, and there was a lot of back and forth, and I initially didn't support it, and for a variety of reasons it ended up in the housing element. And I think that for me, one of the things that I appreciate the most is that the property owner and the potential developer made a commitment to develop to 250 units, and they've stuck with that. We had other developers who represented projects both at the dais and in writing that they have reneged on. So I would like to applaud the developers for their efforts to work with the community, because I know initially there were some significant concerns about the project, but I do want to upfront acknowledge the hard work that's gone into this, both from the position of the neighborhoods who did a very good job of advocating for their position. So thank you for that. I also feel it's important to point out that this is a neighborhood, Fox Point, that has gone through some pretty significant changes over the years. And, you know, there's the one thing that's constant, and that's change. They used to exit out onto a road called Woodley Road, which essentially dead-ended to the east into ag land that was owned by the Eckies. And then they could go west to the freeway and down to Highway 101. But with the Encinitas Ranch development agreement, Leucadia Boulevard came along and punched through there and obviously made a significant impact on their neighborhood. And so this land, which was to be ag in perpetuity, now was rezoned with an overlay that allowed 30 dwelling units per acre. So again, a significant change, and I appreciate all the letters of support from the neighbors in that neighborhood. So to Mr. Kybell and the appellants, I think that my greatest disappointment is that the staff report for this meeting tonight addressed each of your appeal points and explained why they didn't feel that, you know, they did feel that they had laid out effectively and according to the law, this EIR. And it is indeed one of the reasons why the Planning Commission unanimously approved it. While I regret having to include a statement of overriding considerations in the EIR, especially for the issue of traffic, which I think our community as a whole is most concerned about. It is part of the housing element process. So I think that that's probably the biggest issue tonight in hearing this appeal, is that the appellant's presentation didn't address the responses that staff gave to their appeal points. And so I'm in a position where I do support staff's recommendation that we deny the appeal, and I would make a motion that we do that.
Okay, thank you. I'll second that. Yeah, so thank you to all of the participants here. I wanted to follow up on a couple questions. So the first one relates to the email that we received from from the applicant's counsel, and also that last slide that was put up. And so some of the things in there, additional money for carbon offset credits, purchasing 14.2 acres of an agricultural conservation easement, you know, all those things seem really good. And there were additional important things about the shuttle, and also money for Encinitas for Equality and money for San Diego Water District. Yeah, so what is the status of that offer?
I'm not sure to whom that question is directed.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, if you don't mind, Brian Grover here with Nolan Communities. So we made this offer, you know, regardless of our current status and the status of negotiations with the Encinitas Community Trust. We're making this offer anyway. We're asking that you condition the project to do these things as a show of good faith to address the concerns raised by the ECT. But we do want to be clear, we do not acknowledge that any of these represent mitigation. These are all what we call extraordinary benefits, but we're asking you that you condition our project to do these things, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of extraordinary benefits, because frankly, we want to move on. We don't want to go to court. We don't want to be litigated. We're just trying to build this project. So that's the status.
Well, and so I would, if the city attorney says that it's okay, I would like to ask the motion maker if he would support modifying the motion to include these things?
Well, I actually thought we wouldn't have it as part of the motion, but maybe the city attorney needs to weigh in, because I was going to circle back to this. I'm frankly, as you know, on the North County Transit District Board, and microtransit is a thing, and it is something that I think all of us would appreciate, having 100 and roughly 12 passenger shuttle van to apply towards microtransit that was provided by the transit district as part of a larger program that didn't focus exclusively on this development, but perhaps the whole area, which would include the Baldwin site, as well as Quail Gardens and the Krikorian site, and Clark Avenue. With microtransit, we could do a lot, I think, to address the statement of overriding consideration that we're going to likely experience on other projects as well. So I would like to look at how we can, instead of making this contribution to the California-based carbon offsets, I think we could address some, VMT and carbon, pollutions here in our community. So while I understand that we would have to get an analysis, and we might even want to go out with an RFP for other transit services, so maybe not make it NCTD specific, but my goal would be to allow the city council to explore other ways than a shuttle to address the transit needs of school students, as well as people that might want to go to the grocery store and other things. So that's why I would prefer to maybe circle back to it, but I will defer to the city attorney what she thinks in terms of trying to incorporate this in the motion to deny the appeal.
Madam Mayor,
Right.
Madam Mayor, I would appreciate, just because they've introduced these additional conditions that were being discussed, I would appreciate the opportunity to briefly comment on them, just so you have this our input.
Well, hold on a second. So I want to keep an appropriate amount of order here. So I'm going to go to the city attorney first to address this question, and then we can decide how we're going to manage additional conversation.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council. This is Leslie Devaney, City Attorney. And it is important that tonight, and you've kind of started in this process by having a motion and a second based upon staff's recommendation to deny the appeal, which would be to affirm the environmental documents. You need to be clear that the EIR is certified and not adopted as mitigation measures, or that any of these added benefits are mitigation measures. That would be clear for that would need to be clear for the record. In order to somehow accept what is being proposed by the applicant, you can possibly, I was looking through the actual documents that you have before you, you can include in your resolution before you, after you make it clear that you are or are not going to deny the appeal, that you can include in the resolution what the applicant has proposed by way of a voluntary offer, and say you've accepted these. But because the issues before you are simply the EIR, you can't make it the project conditioned upon that, which should work for you.
But so if we did include in the resolution what the applicant has proposed, does that make it binding?
No, you're merely accepting what he has proposed, and it wouldn't. And I'm going to kind of turn to see if Barry, I know we've been we kind of saw this coming a little bit today, so I'm kind of going to turn to Barry, and I have been kind of working on this in preparation, and Barry's now on the line. And for the members of the public, Barry is the Assistant City Attorney for Encinitas relative to real estate and land use transactions.
Okay, so just to echo what Leslie said, the issue here is whether or not the benefits that are being offered are required as part of the EIR in terms of mitigation. So we want to make clear from your perspective that if in fact you accept those benefits, that you're accepting them as a voluntary offer by the developer, and you're not requiring them as mitigation pursuant to the EIR. Now, the complicating issue is the appeal has brought forward to you has been based on the environmental issues and has not raised issues regarding the underlying permits. In this case, we have a developer who's providing us with some voluntary benefits that you as the city council may decide that you want to accept. And what I would propose that you do is add to your resolution that's before you tonight, a whereas that indicates that those benefits have been offered, not as mitigation, but as voluntary benefits. And then in your final resolutions, you can resolve that you have accepted those benefits. And we will work with staff to incorporate those benefits in the project to make sure that they can be enforceable. And I don't know if Roy has any other comments he'd like to make on that, but I think that that would be the procedure that we could use tonight.
Okay, so just the last part was the part I was really getting at. So that they would be enforceable. So basically, if we do move forward with these, this offer, which I am grateful for and feel is a tremendous offer above and beyond as a show of good faith, as has been indicated, I'd be inclined to accept these and not go into some future negotiation that is expansive and unclear, but to accept these generous additional offers. But I just wanted to clarify that it would actually become binding if we did that today.
Correct. And that's based on the developer's voluntary offer and your acceptance of their voluntary offer.
And reliance upon that acceptance that you would articulate in the resolution.
Okay. Okay. So I'll give Mr. Kybell I'll just give you 2 minutes, and the city clerk can time it to respond to this additional offer. But actually, before you do that, I just want to confirm with the applicant that this is a real offer, that you are, Mr. Grover, that is what's happening here.
That's correct, Mayor. Yeah, I'll just reiterate. It's a show of good faith based on what's been asked for by the Encinitas Community Trust. We're trying to avoid litigation. They had actually requested that these things be made conditions of approval several months ago. We're just trying to execute on their request.
Okay. Okay, great. So let's hear from Mr. Kybell for 2 minutes. Up to 2 minutes.
Thank you. And I can confirm that some of these issues that were put out there now were part of the discussions. I just wanted to highlight 2 reasons why, as they were currently framed, ECT had problems with them. The first relates to the carbon offsets. There are a lot of very slipshod carbon offset programs. Many of them allow for out-of-state carbon offsets or even out-of-the-country offsets that are very illusory and aren't viewed as very credible environmentally. So one of the issues that we were focused on was making sure that the carbon offsets were, one, subject to a program approved by the California Air Resources Board, and 2, that they only took place within California, not outside, because outside of California, those kind of offset programs are not viewed as particularly legitimate. In terms of the shuttle, a lot of the concern was the duration. And right now, as to how long they will operate the shuttle, whether it's 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, that was an issue that was being negotiated. I do appreciate that these offers are being put out there, but the lack of specificity about what carbon offset programs will be allowed and the lack of specificity about the duration of how long they're agreeing to operate the shuttle, we also thought it should have been extended to the high school. But I'm a little bit concerned that the current form that they're in, where it just says we'll operate a shuttle or some carbon offsets, doesn't really give the assurances that the offsets will be meaningful or that the shuttle will be operated for any specific duration.
Okay, well, let's just see if Mr. Grover would agree that it has to be approved by the California Air Resources Board and credits apply within California.
Yes, yeah. So what we have proposed here before you tonight is the purchase of $100,000 of carbon offsets from a registry, a CARB-approved registry, and we have committed to those being California-based credits per the request of Mr. Kybell and the ECT.
Okay. And then what about the 12 passenger van for 5 years or so?
Yeah, so similarly, what we've committed to tonight is a 12-passenger van going to Capri and Degano, the elementary school and the middle school that would be served by the project. What Mr. Kybell mentioned about the duration of operations, they had asked for 15 years of guaranteed operations. What we had proposed was 5, so that we could operate for 5 years. I just heard Councilmember Kranz talk about, you know, the desire to possibly start a pilot program through the NCTD that might serve these types of projects. You know, we kind of would like the opportunity to take a look at how things are operating in 5 years, maybe expand our program. You know, as it relates to this shuttle, I do want to commend the ECT. This is something that we think would benefit our project. It's not mitigation. It's not triggered by a CEQA impact. So it's, you know, we don't agree that it being raised in the realm of the CEQA document, but we want to make the most of it. We want to make it a positive component of our project and have a really cool way for our kids to get to school that's not in a single occupant vehicle.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying. So this that's been put up here, thank you for putting that up. I'm trying to figure out how that could happen. So this is the more specifics that I think should put Mr. Kybell's concerns at rest. And I guess, you know, my second of the motion would be dependent upon the acceptance of these. So if that's not, you know, I would like to have clarity about what's happening here tonight, and I think that the developer does as well. And so these seem to me to be very generous, and I would like to accept these tonight, and so make that clear. But I guess we'll come back to that because I see everyone else has their hand up too. But I just want to say, in summary, bravo. This is an amazing project, and I am thrilled to review it, to have it be the very first project on the housing element update that comes to us. I'm thrilled that you got so many community amenities into it, and the affordable units being 40 instead of just 25 is really substantial and important for our community. So thank you for doing that. And I do not see that there are any problems with the environmental review. And I recognize that there are a lot. This project could be double this size. So you could have 500 units on this acreage. Is that true? I think that's true. It's potentially 500 units, and you're putting only 250 on it. And so I very much hope that this is a project. You know, we see a lot of litigation in this city, and I really very much hope that with the concessions and additional offers that have been made tonight, that the appellant does not see fit to move forward with trying to stall this project. You know, we know that a lot of environmental documents are sued. Their litigation comes out of them, and a lot of times really what the result is just delay and cost. And recognizing that this project is not going to get better. It's going to get worse potentially, and we really don't want that. So having a really great project here in this part of our city is something that we would all benefit from. And it's really great to see this as the first project, because it sets the tone, I think, for the rest of the projects that were on the housing element update. There was one question that I didn't see addressed at all, and I just want to bring it up, was the question of bike and ped access through the project, and particularly around, you know, the issues of blocking off the community from the surrounding community. There are lots of projects that we have had that have integrated into neighborhoods, and I just wanted to ask Mr. Grover if you could address anything about that helps promote that walking and biking ability, because that is something that's a requirement of our code and also a high value for us.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, in our preliminary discussions with the residents of the existing Fox Point community, one of their primary concerns was offsite parking of our Fox Point Farms residents on Sidonia Street, which is within their community. We have no intentions of doing so. We've made certain commitments that were memorialized at the Planning Commission hearing in that regard. And the lack of having a direct access to that street in the middle of our site was to further support and address that concern that was raised by the community. Now, to that end, we do have on-site trails that are open to both the public and our residents, and there is a connection point at the corner of Leucadia Boulevard and Sidonia Street. So it's not that we were very particular about not walling off this community because of those concerns that you just raised, Mayor. And we do have multiple connection points between this proposed project and the existing community, just not right onto Sidonia Street at the middle of our site.
Okay, and what about accessing the trails on the other side?
Oh, yeah, understood. So that's actually a very contentious issue, given that there's a large private property and there's a misunderstanding among the public that there is a public access point at the end of Sidonia Street into Indian Head Canyon to the north. Frankly, that's private property, and unless that property owner wanted to provide some sort of easement to provide direct access for our residents or for the public, we can't provide any connections along the northern portion of our property.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Let me go to the council members. Councilmember Mosca.
Thank you, and thank you to the applicant and the appellant and all of the residents that have sent us emails and tonight have shared with us their viewpoint on this issue, on this project. It is an important project. You know, it kind of, I'm just sitting here thinking about it. I remember back, I'm not sure how long it was, but it seems like a long time ago that we had that meeting up at the senior center, the community center, where we first were talking about the fifth housing element. And this was a project that came up for the first time, at least for me, it was the first time I had heard about an agrihood. And I got to tell you, this exceeds my expectations. Now, I completely understand that the issue before us tonight is the environmental analysis and whether or not that comports with CEQA. But I gotta say, kudos to the developer here, to the applicant, because it really does exceed our expectations, at least this council member's expectations. And I think that it really does raise the bar and the type of projects that we expect and that we appreciate in Encinitas. Because I really do appreciate all the community benefits that we've just talked about and hopefully will be accepted. And all of the other community benefits that are part of this project that have been worked upon over the last several months. I appreciate the community character that you infused into this project. I appreciate the environmental sustainability of this project. I appreciate the amount of affordable housing in this project. Let's not lose track of that. That is extraordinarily important. It's one of our first projects out of the gate that's really providing much needed affordable housing in this city. And so it's really an important thing. And I really appreciate the developer, the applicant, working with the neighbors. And there were a lot of issues that really tracked a lot of the emails that came in over the last several months. And there was really a great dialogue between the developer and the residents. And I think that shows, right? I mean, we have a project before us that really, it sticks to what was originally kind of envisioned, but there's also a lot of changes that occurred because of community input. So I think it's for the better, and it's a great project. And for that reason, I'm going to support the motion. But I'm also back to the issue that's before us in terms of the appeal. I'm supporting this project not only because of the community benefits, because I think the facts support the Planning Commission's finding that there's substantial evidence for the fact that there's less than significant impacts. There's support in the record that all of the impacts have been disclosed and that there are adequate mitigation measures that have been put in place. And so for all those reasons, I'm going to support the motion. And I hope that the mayor's point about a separate resolution that shows that we are voluntarily accepting the benefits that the developer has put forth tonight, that they're not mitigation, they're not meant to mitigate any environmental impacts, but they're being accepted as voluntary benefits. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. I have some comments, and first kind of a question I want to return to, hopefully that won't complicate things, but something that Councilmember Krantz brought up was the issue of $100,000 in these carbon offset credits and applying that to a shuttle system or a fund in which the city could explore a local shuttle system. And it sounds like Holland was asking for some type of a shuttle service.
I'm having a hard time hearing. I don't know if is everyone else having that?
Yes.
Okay. I think it might be you, Councilor Renzi. It was really, really slow and then it got really fast. And I wasn't sure if there was a question in there.
Yeah, so how is it right now when I'm talking? Can you hear me okay?
It's fine at this second, yeah.
I'll stop my video in hopes that the audio is a little bit more clear. How's that? Is that good?
Yeah, that's good. Go ahead. Yeah.
So my question that I don't want to further complicate things, but I think that Councilmember Krantz's point was a good one, in that instead of using this $100,000 to purchase offset carbon, that we could use that fund, $100,000 locally here, to start up some type of shuttle system that could service more than one project. So I don't want to complicate things, and it sounds like you've already gone above and beyond to offer these additional benefits, but is that something that the applicant would consider?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Hensy. I think to be completely frank with everybody in this meeting, we offered these. I mentioned the 12 passenger shuttle. We think that we can make that something that makes our project better, and so we're embracing that. These other items, it's really giving money to the state, giving money to the water district, giving money to the county. We're happy to do those things. We're happy to do those as extraordinary benefits. We're doing them because the ECT had requested that these 4 issue areas be addressed. And so I would redirect your question to Mr. Kybell and the members of the ECT that are present here tonight and see what they have to say about that. We are amenable to it, yes.
I'm amenable to redirecting the $100,000 to some other use. Is that the question?
Not some other use, to the use of applying it towards a micro-transit solution for the project area and other parts of the city in that vicinity.
Yeah, I guess, and obviously there's a lot of new stuff that's sort of being thrown, so I'm not sure that I can speak definitively on half of the ECT. The members really felt, as we looked at the 4 areas in terms of carbon offsets, in terms of agricultural easements, in terms of the shuttle and the water supply issues, that they were 4 really important discrete areas for the membership of ECT. So the way that they were structured as those 4 areas really reflected their concerns that there be, very clear commitments to reduce the carbon GHG offsets. So I think the preference of ECT, based on my conversations with them, would be to keep it that way. But I will add one other thing. When the discussions were happening with Nolan over the carbon offsets, the way that ECT felt it should be focused was not on a financial commitment of, say, $100,000 or $200,000, that it really was a commitment to offset a certain amount of metric tons. And that was sort of a sticking point that we didn't get resolved. I appreciate the offer that's been made here to make it a project condition. We recognize that, but our view is that $100,000 in terms of what that's going to allow them to buy is going to make a relatively tiny dent in the 36,000 or 72,000. So I guess what I'm just putting out there for the city council's consideration is that while I think it's fine to maybe accept these, if you're really serious about your climate action plan and about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, you need to start requiring developers to actually mitigate the greenhouse gases that they're causing. And this $100,000, while it's appreciated, does not go very far in that regard. I'm not opposing it, but I'm just saying it does not go very far in that regard, which means in terms of achieving your goals with your climate action update, it's not going to help you that much. But it's definitely a step in the right direction, and having it accepted as project conditions, I think, is the right way to do it rather than a private agreement.
That answer.
Is that helpful?
Maybe you should turn off your video again, Kelly.
Yes. Perhaps there's something that we could include in these, what are they called? Exceptional benefits that is an or, like it would honor ECT's request with the offset purchases or could be used for microtransit. Because what I hear and what I experience is that as projects, both with the R30 designation and also just individual projects develop around the city, these cumulative impacts, while not a concern with this project because it's the first one, will start to become an issue. And so if all the developers were willing to add to a fund that would create a microtransit option for residents, that would be a really good one. But I don't want to put that onus on this project specifically because they're the first one and they're already offering such exceptional benefits. So all I want to say, I just want to clarify one more thing with the applicant, and that is that I love the benefits for the community, including the trails and the recreational space and access to the farm animals. That was one of my most treasured things about growing up in Encinitas, was that there were always farm animals in everybody's backyard. And we actually lost our last goat in the neighborhood a couple months ago, and that was really sad for us. But are these assets open to the public? Like the public could enter the property without the assumption of consumption. They don't need to be buying something at the restaurant or the farm stand to be able to come and use those aspects.
Yeah, that's correct, Councilmember Hinsey. There's a 2-acre public serving amenity area with a farm stand, a restaurant, an event space, and a large community green. That area is open to the public. It's not a private area. You don't have to buy something at the farm stand or the restaurant to be able to, go kick a soccer ball with your friend or your kids on that green space. It's a purely public serving space.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I will just conclude with some of my comments because I really want more developers to follow the model that you've set with this project. And honestly, when I look through the renderings, I have such a feeling of reverence for what you've accomplished here in the design and the devotion that you've shown to this community. You've not only honored our city council, but our planning staff by making good on so many of the commitments, and the 76 residents who can support this project because of the time and effort that you've spent in working with them. I think, speaking from a member of my own generation, this is exactly what we want to live in. This ability to create housing for the missing middle, for folks that live in Encinitas who are professionals, dual income, and still can't afford to buy a home here. I think you're creating those homes. And I just look at these projects and think how many of my friends have had to leave and might have been able to stay if this project had come online sooner. So I want to thank you for that. You've, like Ron Dodge said, you've created a complete community here. So you're creating something with this restaurant, this recreational space, this farm stand, this access to our local heritage and our agriculture that really doesn't exist right now in this form. So I want to commend you for that. Additionally, that these units are for sale, and you're really creating an entry point for people to become homeowners in our city. And I think that's unique among many of these R30 projects we're starting to see submit applications. Lastly, I'll just say that you've done an amazing job that actually enhancing our community character. And I think seeing this project and hearing the testimony of our planning commissioners and the folks who chose to speak tonight just reveals that you've kind of flipped the paradigm, that Encinitas is no longer opposed to every housing project. That there's a project here we love and we want to embrace, and we're eager to give you our full support. So that's all I have to say, and just thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Yeah, is that possible to put that letter from Marco back up on the screen? So one possible solution would be that that first point number one could say funding of micro transit in Encinitas, or the purchase of, and the same thing could be, you could start the sentence the same way down there at item number 4, and we can pretty easily get information from Transit Agency, NCTD. The micro transit program that has been piloted from, in Carlsbad with micro transit buses from the Poinsettia station of the coaster to businesses along the Palomar Airport Road corridor was working well until the pandemic hit. But those type of microtransit options are being explored in Oceanside and San Marcos, and I think eventually they'll be here in Encinitas. So it would pain me to write a check to the for carbon offset credits somewhere in the state of California when that $100,000 check could help to fund a solution right here in Encinitas. And when you look at this 12-passenger van and it's going to Capri and Degano, both school districts here in Encinitas have open enrollment policies. So it isn't even 100% certain that all of the students that may live in this project will go to both of those schools. Maybe they go to Ocean Old because they want the baccalaureate program, or they choose SDA because it's a school of choice and in my opinion, the best school in San Diego District. So to me, I think that looking at microtransit as a solution as opposed to a 12-passenger van would get closer to what ECT wants, which is to reduce carbon emissions. And so I think if we lost that opportunity, it would be unfortunate. So that's what I would propose, is that we start points 1 and points 4 with, the funding of microtransit.
So you're saying it's an or. It's basically adding a clause that says an or.
And the city council, we could actually, defer to ECT if they we put a presentation together and if they say no, I think I think the goal is to avoid a lawsuit. So I recognize that. That's one of the reasons why there is this generous offer, because these had all been points that had come up in the discussions between the developer and ECT. That was the meeting that I sat in on, and these offers were made soon after that meeting. So they've been on the table for a while. And it's, I think, important to recognize that is in fact a main goal, is to get past the idea that this is all going to be litigated ad infinitum. And I'm not suggesting we deny anybody's rights, but at the same time, I would certainly like to get to the point where we weren't spending money in that way.
I have a solution, at least as to one that maybe offers a middle path. You know about the middle path, right? I know my clients were focused on carbon offsets, but I hear your point, Tony, about if there's a way to focus that. I mean, that's why we didn't want to go out of state, right? We wanted the money to be spent proverbially in the county. But I'm wondering if it could be changed to $50,000 of carbon offsets, and that $50,000 can be used either for carbon offsets or microtransit. Because I do know my clients, the carbon offsets was important, and I would not feel comfortable telling you right now that will satisfy them, but I'm feeling like if there was a way that some of it was set aside for the purpose that they specified in the negotiations, but I do think your point is well taken that if it can have an impact and reduce carbon emissions here, close in town, that's great.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that one of the things that is frustrating. I would prefer to have some flexibility and to continue this conversation about this particular aspect outside of this setting. And my concern is that if we adopt the resolution with this exact language in it, it's done. And
but our concern is if it's not done now, then it just becomes there's no certainty as to it. So I do think incorporating the provisions that we have here, even if they don't go quite as far as ECT wanted, as project conditions, will go a long way towards ameliorating the concerns that we had, which is, I mean, we had made this request a while back that we really wanted it not to be a private agreement and to be part of the project conditions. So we appreciate, even if the terms are a little bit less than we wanted, we appreciate it being in that format, and we would urge you to go ahead and adopt it. But I think I would be comfortable making a change to one that built in at least for 50,000 of those $100,000 to be dedicated towards microtransit projects that reduce VMT as a starting point. I mean, obviously, if we had more time and we could think this through more, but I think it's important that there's not going to be a situation where ECT is going to be like, we'll just have a discussion in 2 months without locking this in.
Yeah, I guess another question I would have for the city attorney is there a way that you can see that if we were to adopt this exact language right here, there might be a reopener if we could, present some facts about a possible microtransit option. Is there a way to get back to this particular resolution and amend it, I guess is the question.
That's a good question. I believe there would be because of the fact that it's in a resolution, and resolutions can always come back, and it's not part of the EIR appeal. But I would just run that by Barry, who I believe is still on, see if he thinks differently.
Yeah, okay, so what we're doing here is we're taking this language that's been proposed by the developer and adding it to project conditions, so they would become a project condition. If in fact we were to look at some flexibility with respect to this micro transit program, to either reduce the 100,000 towards carbon offset or 50,000, the way that I would see that happening is through some type of substantial conformance review. And that's a specific project where a specific process where project conditions might be modified if they comply with the substantial conformance requirements. So I would defer to Roy as to whether or not that would be a way to have the flexibility that we're talking about, but it's important to understand that these would be conditions to the project.
Okay, maybe we should hear from Mr. Grover about all this discussion of these, if it's still an offer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So yeah, I think you could just make the change right now. We could make this a lot easier on ourselves and say the purchase of $50,000 of carbon offsets from the California, Climate Action Registry, and 50,000 goes towards a local, to be determined microtransit program. If that's acceptable to ECT, that's acceptable to us. Again, what we're trying to do here is address the issues that have been raised on this appeal. And besides item 4, which we are turning into an asset for our project, items 1, 2, and 3 are really assets for the community. So if we can make it more of a local asset and not just send money to Sacramento, I think we would all prefer that.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up here and make these changes. So he just said it, right? 50,000. Do we want to say
50,000? And I'm amenable to 50,000 for the Climate Action Registry and 50,000. And I don't know if we need to define microtransit as being, San Diego, North County, or Greater Encinitas. Maybe that term has a meaning, but I think my clients would actually prefer that some of that money be used for VMT reduction locally.
Yeah, and
so I think this is a way that captures that.
And the way the microtransit is being done is it is localized to the city of Encinitas. So we could say Encinitas microtransit option, 50,000 towards a microtransit, Encinitas microtransit option.
So it sounds like we have. So it sounds like the developer and the appellant agree. So Tony, do you agree as well with the language they just came up with? So we can go to vote.
Sure, because 50,000 is better than 0.
That's the middle path.
So we have a meeting of the minds.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, then let's go ahead and vote on this.
Councilmember Hensy,
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Krantz,
Yes.
and Mayor Blakespear.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you, Mr. Kybell, for working collaboratively here, and Mr. Grover and Mr. Gonzalez, all of you involved in this, and the public. And we're excited to have apparently reached resolution. It's great. So we will move on to our next item.
Thank you.
Which is a report on El Portal and streetscape.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council. We are super excited to bring before you tonight 2 projects which have been many years in coming. As you know, they are beginning construction this month. But the purpose of this evening's presentation is to reaffirm our commitment to responsiveness and transparency, because we in the city believe that successful construction ensures that our community and our residents are brought along with us, that we are responsive to them, that they know what is happening in their community, what the impacts are, and know where they can go to get the answers that they need.
So Lillian, we can see your slides on the right side. I don't know if you mean to be sharing all of your screen.
No, that's on my end. It worked so well earlier. Let me try to fix this.
Oh, okay.
So my apologies. Leading the presentation this evening is Mr. Pat Pyatt in concert with our communications teams, JPW, Suzanne Bankhead, and Leslie Spring. And on the Sandag side, Alex Welling and Katz and Associates, Derek Keeley and Teddy. With that, I will turn it over.
Now, does it look like the presentation, or do you still see the notes?
We still see the notes. We see the presentation on the left, and then your PowerPoint speaking words on the right.
Okay.
Suzanne, is it possible for you to run the slideshow for us?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm with you now. Absolutely. I just would need, let me just double check if I can share and get that pulled up. Give me 1 minute.
Try one more time and see if it works with this. What do you see now? Still see the notes?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, Suzanne, you better do that part.
Can everybody see that okay?
Yes. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Okay.
So, Pat, thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Mayor and members of the council. I'm Pat Pyatt, Senior Management Analyst and Acting Public Information Officer with the City of Encinitas. And here's our agenda and how we plan to break out our presentation to you this evening. I'm joined by a fantastic team of staff, city staff, Sandak staff, and contractors. And I'd like to introduce those that will be helping with the presentation. Ali DeVoe is a project engineer and project manager with Sandag for the El Portal Undercrossing project. Jill Bankston is a project engineer and project manager with the city for the Lucadia Streetscape project. And Alex Welling is an associate public outreach officer with Sandag, overseeing communications for the El Portal project. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of construction details, it always helps to start with the vision for the projects to give insight to why they're so important to our community. Together, these projects achieve goals of the city's strategic plan to better incorporate rail corridor into our neighborhoods and to improve connectivity and mobility for all. During the January 13th, 2021 council meeting, the City Council reaffirmed the commitment to make the community's vision for this area a reality by solving long-term issues of flooding and by making it easier to get around, whether in car or bike or on foot. Now I'm going to hand the presentation over to Ali DeVoe with Sandag and she will walk you through the details of the El Portal undercrossing project.
Thank you, Pat. Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Ali DeVoe and I'm a senior engineer with Sandag. I'm the project manager for the El Portal undercrossing project, which Sandag is delivering on behalf of the city of Encinitas. Today, I'll be providing an overview of the project and some details on what you can expect during construction. The graphic you see on screen now provides an overview of the project area, which is primarily in the railroad right-of-way adjacent to Highway 101 and Vulcan Avenue between Union Street and Halcyon Road. The main purpose of this project is to connect the east and west sides of the railway between Vulcan Ave and Highway 101 and El Portal Street to provide a safe pathway for parents and children to get to school and residents to access the beach. Next slide, please. Here you see a plan view and cross-section rendering of the final undercrossing configuration, as well as the adjacent streetscape improvements. The pathways leading from the undercrossing will provide access to the existing crosswalk on Vulcan Ave near Union Street, and also the 2 crosswalks that will be constructed on Highway 101 by the streetscape project. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the main purpose of this project is to provide a safe crossing for pedestrians and bicyclists across the railroad tracks and to improve connectivity. The El Portal undercrossing will be a similar construction process and final product as the Santa Fe undercrossing shown on the left. The graphic on the right shows how the undercrossing will look when completed in conjunction with the streetscape improvements and how the improvements of both projects will come together. Next, please. So what to expect during construction? We issued the notice to proceed to our contractor on October 14th. And since then, they've been busy processing submittals, obtaining their right of entry permit from NCTD, and beginning some preliminary site work. The anticipated construction duration is from late 2020 to spring 2022. Construction hours will generally be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. However, there will be 4 weekends over the course of construction where crews will work up to 24 hours a day. During these weekends, planned well in advance by North County Transit District, trains aren't in service, which allows the contractor to perform work that is not possible when trains are operating. I'll provide some more details on work anticipated during these windows later in the presentation. We do anticipate some lane closures on Vulcan Ave and Highway 101, and there will be less parking available along the railroad in the project area. Bike lanes will also may be temporarily impacted and temporarily unavailable during construction. And we'll work with the city throughout construction to minimize these impacts to the extent possible. And like with any construction project, you may notice noise and lights during the construction period. So throughout the construction project, will adhere to environmental guidelines, including water quality during and after construction. The contractor is already prepared and is adhering to their stormwater pollution prevention plan. There will be materials recycling. They'll be controlling site conditions such as water runoff, monitor for resources, and also implementing traffic control plans, which address the full pickup and drop-off times, farmers market traffic on Sundays. Next slide. All right, in these next few graphics, I'll walk through some of the construction processes you can expect to see during the course of the project. One of the major elements of constructing this undercrossing is building the bridge foundations. The bridge will be supported by cast and drilled hole piles, also called CIDH piles, similar to the Santa Fe Drive crossing you could see under construction in this photo. A total of 16 piles will be installed during this project to build the bridge foundations. Large 36-inch diameter holes will be drilled into the ground. A large steel section will be dropped into the hole, and then the hole will be filled with concrete. Next, please. Here you see the next step in the pile installation process, where the pile holes are filled in with the concrete. Although some of these foundation piles can be installed during regular working hours, many will have to be installed during the absolute work windows or AWWs due to their close proximity to the railroad tracks. Although construction schedules are subject to change, it's anticipated that this work will take place during the February and March absolute work windows. Next slide. To complete construction of the bridge, another AWW will be utilized to place the final bridge structure. The final bridge structure will be composed of precast concrete girders that will be placed on top of the pile foundations. And since removal of the railroad tracks is required as a part of this process, it also must be done during an absolute working window when trains aren't in service. Once the bridge structure is finished, the track will be reconstructed and put back into service at the end of the work window. We anticipate this work will be done either in the second March or the April AWW in 2021. Another major component of this project is construction of the retaining walls that will form the pathways to and from the undercrossing. These walls are composed of colored concrete reinforced with steel rebar and are constructed with the use of a form liner that will provide a decorative finish on the walls. Mosaic tile artwork will also be incorporated into the retaining wall face. Next slide. Once construction of the retaining walls is complete, to provide grade separation, the pathways to the undercrossing will be constructed. There will be ADA compliant pathways on both the east and west side of the crossing, as well as staircases leading to and from the undercrossing to the sides and adjacent streets. There will also be substantial lighting installed along the pathways and throughout the undercrossing. Next, please. And one of the final pieces of construction is installation of landscaping and fencing. The project area will be landscaped with various shrubs and native grasses. There will be wood post and cable fencing ranging from 3.5 to 4 feet tall. It will be installed to provide a barrier between the tracks and the undercrossing improvements, as well as retaining walls, similar to the photo shown of the Santa Fe undercrossing. Steel handrails will be installed along the concrete accessible ramp and staircases. So shown on this slide is the photo of the Santa Fe undercrossing grand opening in February 2013. The final product of the El Portal project will provide a similar accessibility for pedestrians and bicyclists to safely cross the railroad tracks. We anticipate the undercrossing to be open to the public in spring 2022. These next couple of slides show you some existing conditions. So the photo you see here is of Highway 101 looking north. It shows the approximate locations of the 2 new crosswalks in yellow that will be installed with streetscape, and the undercrossing location roughly in orange. It's actually a little bit kind of off of the photo in this circumstance. Next slide. And this is a similar existing condition photo showing Vulcan Avenue and Highway 101 looking south. Again, you see those 2 new crosswalks on the right in yellow, and the underpass location in orange, and the existing crosswalk location on Vulcan on the left. So as I mentioned earlier, the contractor received notice to proceed in October. And since then, they have obtained all the necessary approvals to start work on site. To date, they've installed fencing around the project area, set up their construction trailers and staging areas, and installed fiber rolls and other BMPs for stormwater pollution prevention. Okay. So the current focus of our contractor is preparing for the upcoming absolute work window over the weekend of February 20th. During this weekend, the rail will be closed to allow the contractor to work unobstructed by train operations. The contractor will work throughout the duration of the weekend, including overnight, to install some of the piles for the bridge foundation. Also, Verizon's contractor will be on site to relocate the fiber optic cable within the railroad right away. Our communications team will be working on significant outreach in advance of this work. And now I'd like to hand things over to Jill Bankston, project engineer and project manager with the city, to talk through the details on the Leucadia Street Safe project.
Allie. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jill Bankston. I'm the city's principal engineer, and I'm the project manager for the Leucadia Streetscape Phase 1 project for the city. Next slide, please. So I'll start out by talking a little bit about our project team that has helped us get to this point where we're just starting up our construction phase. We've got M.W. Peltz and Associates, who did the landscape design for the project. We have Michael Baker International, who did the roadway and drainage design. We, of course, as the City of Encinitas, is the project sponsor and the funder. We've brought on Somas as our construction management consultant, and we're working closely with JPW for our communications. And Granite, of course, is our construction contract, and it's the same contractor, of course, on El Portal and Leucadia Streetscape. Thank you. So what are the project goals for Leucadia Streetscape? So we have 4 main goals that we've been working towards as we're bringing the project plans together. We want to enhance safety and mobility in and through the rail corridor. We want to increase access to our coastline. We want to add landscaping, parking, and traffic calming measures to the project area. We're going to be planting approximately 100 new trees throughout the phase 1 project. And we're looking to preserve and revitalize the North Coast Highway 101 corridor through the community of Leucadia. So the project is really all about connection, making it easier to get around this section of the 101, whether you're in a car, on a bike, or on foot. So this is a map of the main roadway improvements. So you can see the area highlighted in green between Basil Street and Marchetta Street is where you'll see the main roadway and sidewalk improvements. In addition to this project area, we will be adding a new storm drain infrastructure that starts at El Portal and heads south to A Street to alleviate some of the flooding in this area. And we will also be adding parking pods on the east side of the 101 through the project limits, the green project limits, and then up north toward Jupiter Street. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you some idea of the project benefits that we'll see with the construction of this project. It will be a connection to the El Portal undercrossing for cyclists and pedestrians. We'll have the roundabout at El Portal that will help keep traffic flowing better through the area. We're going to reduce the roadway from 4 lanes to 2 lanes for the 101 in this segment. We will add new buffered bike lanes and wider sidewalks in front of the businesses and restaurants on the 101. We'll have improved crosswalks and new crosswalks along with street lighting for pedestrians. New trees, as I mentioned before, approximately 100 new trees, and enhanced landscaping. And that landscaping is either native or drought tolerant landscaping in most cases. One of the big additions that we'll have to this project is with the new stormwater infrastructure, we'll have stormwater treatment. So the stormwater runoff that currently just goes into our storm drain system and out to the lagoon or the ocean will have new stormwater treatment through biofiltration or dispersion or other stormwater treatment measures. Next, we'll have advanced or enhanced bus stops along the 101 in this corridor. And we'll be replacing the stop sign that's currently at Marchetta with an enhanced crosswalk with flashing lights for safety. So it's one of the push buttons to help people get across. Next slide, please. So why the roundabout at El Portal? So there's 4 main reasons why we look to include a roundabout with this project instead of a traffic signal or keeping the stop signs here. Number 1, we want to enhance safety. When you have a roundabout, you're reducing the number of conflict points. You're getting rid of those left turns where you're crossing in front of through traffic, and you're slowing traffic speeds at the intersection. So all of those factors will help reduce the number of collisions and the severity of collisions that would happen at a standard traffic light. Will improve traffic flow. So at a roundabout, you yield before entering the roundabout and aren't required to stop. So that will keep traffic moving and flowing through the corridor. We will save money, maintenance and operations money. Traffic signals require replacement and painting and electrical costs, things like that. So with a roundabout, we'll have landscaping and things that are less costly to maintain in the long run. And we'll have reduced pollution when you have cars that are moving through the intersection rather than stopping and idling, you're going to be reducing your greenhouse gases. So that's a good benefit to this project as well. Next slide, please. One more click for me, please. All right, so here's the current perspective of Athena Street. We've shared this one in previous presentations, looking across at Panican, lots of pavement, mostly the areas dedicated to vehicular traffic, not many community-focused amenities, mostly vehicles. Click again, please. And this is what the project area will look like. After we have streetscape, you can see we've reduced the number of through lanes from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane in each direction. You can see the buffered bike lane, parking pods on the far left side of the slide, new landscaping, landscape medians, and there's wider sidewalks over on the sides. Next slide, please. One more click. We've got a couple new renderings for everyone to see. So this is a rendering looking north on the 101 by Bliss Yoga near Marchetta Street. If you do another click, you can see the enhancements that we'll add. We'll have new landscaping. We're keeping the heritage trees that are there. We'll have landscape medians. This area has reverse angle parking, wider sidewalks, and more community focused. Next slide, please. So this is the perspective right at Marchetta, looking across toward where the future undercrossing will be at El Portal. One more click. And this is what that area will look like in the future, looking through the roundabout to the undercrossing that you can see kind of in the far reaches of this perspective. So more space for pedestrians, cyclists, better flow of the traffic through the area, and just more space for the community to use the area. Next slide, please. So timeline, what are we looking at as we move forward? So we are working with the contractor now to initialize his construction efforts. So he's on site. It's largely the same team that is at the El Portal office. So they've got their trailer out there. They've brought BMPs onto the site to start installing BMPs. We've worked with them on their construction schedule, and they'll be working to start active construction within the next couple of weeks. And once we get started, then we expect to wrap up the construction in late spring 2022. Next slide, please. So this is a graphic that gives kind of a cartoon look at all of the project elements that will be incorporated into the streetscape project. So the first order of work for the contractor, as I mentioned, is the parking pods that will be to the north of the main work area. So those north of Basil Street. That will be the first order of work. After that, they'll move down to the storm drain, and they'll do the storm drain work between El Portal and A Street, starting at A Street and kind of working their way north. So prior to them initiating that work, we'll give the community and everyone a heads up that that work is coming, because that's when you'll first start to see some impacts to the vehicular traffic on the 101. There'll be K-rail placement, lane shifts, things like that to provide a space for the contractor to do their undergrounding of or their installation of the storm drain. After that, the contractor will be able to work on the northbound lanes. Next, he'll shift over to the median and get the median in place. Next, they'll do the southbound lanes, and finally, they'll finish out with the sidewalks on the west side of the road. So that is the current flow of the traffic or the construction schedule. It's subject to change, it's subject to material availability and all of those things, but that's the general plan of how we expect the work to unfold. And then next, I'm going to pass the project over to Alex.
Thanks, Jill. My name's Alex Welling. I am the Sandag Communications Manager for the El Portal project. And before getting to our communications efforts, I wanted to touch briefly on project safety. We recognize that both projects are taking place in one of the city's most populous areas. As such, safety is our #1 priority during construction. So just to quickly note some of our measures and precautions that we have in place to ensure that this project is delivered safely to the community. We've installed fencing around the construction areas to make sure it's safe and secure. We have designated safety officers and flaggers to assist with any needed traffic control, and also to protect workers who are working actively along the rail line. All of our construction vehicles are equipped with the OSHA mandated backup alarms. We have strict safety requirements for contractors and vehicles that are entering and exiting the project site, and there will also be an added focus on safety in our contractor briefings and trainings. Next slide. Now to kind of jump into the communication. So Sandag and the city have worked together for many months now to develop a comprehensive communications and outreach plan to ensure the community knows about the project, construction timeline, and how to stay informed throughout construction. So here are just a few of our goals for the communications and outreach plan. We obviously want to continue building goodwill and trust within the communities that we work. We want to provide timely, consistent, and accurate communications throughout construction, while also educating all audiences about both of these projects. You know, COVID-19 has kind of thrown a wrench into our traditional public outreach plans. So we want to continue to explore and engage in creative ways given the public health orders, and make sure that we're accomplishing all of these other goals just as effectively if we weren't dealing with COVID-19 right now. And we also want to make sure that all of our communications are coordinated between both projects. And this last bullet is extremely important because we recognize that the public won't be able to tell where El Portal begins and Streetscape ends during construction. We understand that they're going to see it as one project, so we're approaching our communications that way. This is an opportunity, and in our eyes, for Sandag and the city to build on their strong partnerships and collaboration on past projects. Build NCC is a great example of that, and within the Encinitas community. Next slide. So these are just a few of our shared communications tools for people to get in touch with us if they have questions about our projects. We have El Portal project being hosted on keepsandiegomoving.com, and then of course Leucadia Streetscape at the encinitasca.gov/streetscape. Kind of going back to what I was talking about in the last slide about how the public not really knowing where El Portal begins and Streetscape ends, we wanted to create a joint hotline for this project, just one singular resource where the public can call and get a hold of the corresponding project teams. So this hotline number, callers will hear a main greeting and will have the opportunity or the option to hear information on and leave messages for the project of interest by entering submenu greetings. Sandag will respond to El Portal, whereas the city will respond to Leucadia Streetscape inquiries. And then of course we have our project emails. Now I just briefly want to say that these communications tools are not the whole suite of tactics that we're going to be employing throughout the course of construction. These are mainly resources for the public to get more information from us or just ask questions. So there's a whole nother suite, whether it's social media, e-blasts, postcards, door hangers. Those are kind of more the proactive tools that we're going to be employing throughout construction. Next slide, please. And then of course, social media. We have all of our channels here, which are going to be regularly updated with the latest construction information, and we highly encourage everyone to make sure to give us a follow to stay updated. Next slide. And then as far as what we've been up to, so since October, the project teams have been busy kicking off outreach to the community. Here's just a real brief look at what we've been up to over the past couple months. On November 17, we held a well-attended virtual community meeting. We had a kickoff meeting with the construction team and the communications team. We held various meetings and presentations with affected stakeholders, including Paul Ecke Elementary, the Chamber of Commerce, Leucadia 101, and even the Sheriff's Department. We've also had correspondence with the adjacent project teams and other government agencies. We've developed FAQs for both projects, which can be found online, as well as other collateral materials, including fact sheets, banners, signs, and then also business cards, which are very important in projects like this, where we're kind of right in the middle of the community. A lot of times we see members of the public approach members of the construction team on site. So what we've done is develop these business cards that the members of the construction team can hand out to anybody who might have questions about the project, so they know how to get a hold of us. And with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Pat Piet with the city to share more information about how the project teams are closely coordinating communications throughout construction.
Thanks, Alex. So we mentioned that one of the goals of our communications and outreach plan was to coordinate our communications efforts jointly. And I just want to briefly underscore how we're coordinating all public inquiries that come into our established communication channels, whether by email or by phone. This graphic shows the division of labor between our two teams and how inquiries are routed between the team members. And we're essentially using a spreadsheet on steroids to track and enter all inquiries that come in for both El Portal and the streetscape projects. Both Sandag and city teams have access to the platform. It's cloud-based, and the team can coordinate drafting and reviewing responses in one shared resource in real time. This results in us being able to provide information back to the community quickly. We recognize that as a city council, you'd like to see us continue to enhance our communications and outreach to the community. With these projects, we have made this a priority. Our team has done an excellent job to level up our communications, and we've worked to plan ahead to create capacity for collaboration and coordination within the team so the information we provide to the public is consistent and reliable. Another benefit of tracking this data on our spreadsheet on steroids is that we can create a dashboard that quickly illustrates those metrics for us. This is a look at our public inquiry dashboard showing how many public inquiries we have responded to so far, how they came in, their status, the type of inquiry, and lastly, the sentiment of the inquiry, whether positive, negative, or neutral. And we're very proud to say that so far we've had mostly neutral questions and comments come through. All this data helps us understand how people are engaging with the information that we're providing, what's clear, what's not clear, and the general sentiment of the audiences who have comments or questions about the project. This helps us make better decisions about communications for the project in the future. So not only are we tracking the questions and comments that come in about the projects, but we're also tracking our contacts with the public through the project construction. This is a look at our public involvement dashboard showing a quick accounting of how many outreach contacts we've made so far. We're tracking the status of contacts, whether open or closed, and the type of contact, whether by phone, email, or meeting presentation. We're also tracking whether the outreach was to a resident, a business, community association, etc. And we have reached out, as Alex said, to a number of associations and businesses like our one-on-one associations, Encinitas for Equality, businesses in the area, schools, religious groups, and community groups. We're also scheduling several multilingual presentations coming up. While conducting this outreach, we've been collecting casual data about the project awareness. And while this isn't scientific, when we did reach some of the initial outreach contacting stakeholders about the community meeting in November, we asked whether or not folks were aware of the projects. And the results were interesting. At the time, while many were aware of the projects, we found that there were a surprising number in the community who still were unaware of the projects. As our communications and outreach efforts have ramped up, we've seen that awareness increase. And while that split is now around 70 to 30, it was initially about 50 to 50, with many stakeholders still unaware that either project and upcoming construction. So this is a good sign and further underscores the importance of the consistent communications to make sure there are no surprises with the projects or the construction. So you may be wondering about what types of questions we've received so far from the community, and there have been quite a few. We've captured them into an exhaustive, frequently asked questions that is on both project web pages and is being shared with our stakeholders. And here's a few we've received during presentations and our initial outreach. So one question that comes up regularly is how construction will affect school pickup and drop off at Paul Ecke. And Ali DeVoe with Sandag is going to let you know how we're addressing that question.
Thank you, Pat. So this slide shows an aerial of the El Portal project area and the school. The yellow star marks the approximate undercrossing location. So just a few things to point out on the slide. The primary construction area for the El Portal project is within the railroad right-of-way. We have construction entrances on the west side of Vulcan, north of Union Street, and one on the east side of Highway 101, south of El Portal Street. Go to the next slide. So the first route we looked at, the school provided us with their two drop-off and pickup routes to assess the situation. So the east or the blue line Go to the next slide. So this route is far enough east of our project site where we do not anticipate any impact to this drop-off or pickup line during construction. And next slide. So this, the next graphic will show the drop-off and pickup on the west route, or the orange line. So although we will be working adjacent to this route, we don't anticipate any major impacts to drop-off or pickup. Our contractor is required to submit a traffic control plan that addresses pickup and drop-off times for the school, which the city will need to approve. Deliveries are restricted during school drop-off and pickup times. They're not allowed to take deliveries during those times. We do anticipate sidewalk closures on the west side of Vulcan between Union Street and just south of Halcyon Road. But signage will be placed to safely detour the pedestrians, and the crosswalk will be protected in place. Warning signs will be positioned, and a flag person will be assigned when the contractor's equipment may encounter pedestrians or vehicles. And the contractor's traffic control plan will also address any pedestrian detours that are necessary. We do anticipate some road closures along Vulcan, but not many. They should be intermittent, with deliveries and equipment mobilization only, are really our only factors there. So one example would be before or during the absolute work windows where we go to set the bridge girders, they may need some lane closers to pick up and drop off those materials.
Thanks, Sally. And another question we've received is related to the process for public art around the El Portal undercrossing. And Jill Bankston will give the answer that we're giving to people for that question.
So for this question, we let the public know that we did anticipate including public art as part of the El Portal design process and the public input process. But how that art is incorporated still needs to be reviewed and approved by the Arts Commission and City Council.
Another question that came up just last week was whether the North Coast Highway 101 Drainage Improvement Project is related to the Streetscape project. And this is the project where the staff held a virtual public meeting just last week. And Jill will answer this question as well.
So the North Coast Highway 101 Drainage Improvements Project is a little north of our current phase 1 project. It'll be between Basel and La Costa. And the benefits that this project will bring is that it will reduce flooding, so it will be an improvement to pedestrians, vehicles, cyclists, residences, businesses, everybody along the corridor. We'll also be able to incorporate new stormwater best management practices into the new drainage project, similar to what we're doing on the El Portal project. Funding decisions will be made by City Council as they prioritize projects moving forward. But we do anticipate that this would be incorporated into a future phase of Leucadia Streetscape so that we don't have to improve streetscape and then come back and dig up the road. We wouldn't want to do that. So we want to make sure that we're doing these projects in tandem.
Okay, and lastly, Jill will answer this question that comes up about the city's plans for later phases of the Streetscape project.
Yeah. So this project we tackle kind of in a similar fashion. So the entire Streetscape project is 2.5 miles long from A Street to La Costa. The phase 1 project that we're tackling right now is 0.4 miles. So future phases will be determined through City Council prioritization. So we let the public know that there's typically prioritization meetings in the spring, and then a budget is approved in June. And that the length of future segments of Streetscape will be determined by City Council prioritizing the amount of funding that will be available for the next project phase. But we're continuing to finalize the drainage improvements project and getting ready to get the next project phases construction ready.
Thank you, Jill. That concludes our presentation of our communication strategy and what we have been up to since October. We stand by to respond to any questions that you, Mayor, or the council may have for us this evening.
Well, thank you very much. That was really interesting and lots of great information. It's wonderful that we're working together so closely with Sandag as a city, because there's such expertise with the two agencies, especially having done the Santa Fe Swami's Ped Crossing. So it's really great to bring all of that to this project. I did have three things, like kind of comments / questions. The first one is, you know, the answer on what's going on with the art was sort of like, basically like, we don't really know. And I guess I would say to our city staff, our city manager, let's forward this art question. Like, let's figure out where we're going to put the art and what we're going to do so that we can have that, you know, get moving on answering that. So for the benefit of the public and for our benefit, of course, if we need to budget for it. The other two art projects at underpasses, the Caltrans underpasses, have been tremendously successful, and it's public art that we can really be proud of and is part of our community. It's fantastic. So I look forward to that being something that we can do here. The next point, I have 3 points. The second point is, we've talked about, you know, I see these great graphs of like how many people have we responded to and what were the answers and all this. And it makes me think, why don't we have that like on our mode shift? And we've talked about this before, like taking the data we need that shows how many people are biking and walking through this corridor right now, how many are driving, and what will that be afterward, so that we can really be the mode shift is something we've talked about tabulating and capturing, and I really hope we're still moving forward with that. I don't know if anybody on this team is prepared to answer that, but that's really critical. It will show the success of these projects in a way that's very concrete, and we need that to be part of our analysis. And then the third thing is the need to finalize the plans for Leucadia Streetscape totally. You know, when your answer to the people who ask about it is, well, the city council budgets in this cycle and that cycle. I mean, at the moment, the plan is not 100% complete. And so there's really, you know, that's really still the delay is, you know, we're not thinking at this minute about how to finance because we don't have a complete plan. And what we were just talking about with our consent item had to do with whether to complete the design of something. So it's like, if you can complete the design of something, then you can go out for grants and you're shovel ready and all that kind of stuff. So I really want to just emphasize the need for that. And hopefully we can have a report similar to this one about the next phases of Streetscape, and to just make whatever decisions we need to make about big water or whatever the remaining questions are that are needed. So, so I'm hopeful that that will be a follow-up soon that the council can make decisions about. So I don't know if staff, Lillian, you know, who can address those things, mode shift analysis, art, and finalizing the design, but I'm really grateful for the communication staff and all the effort you're putting into this. So thank you very much, truly, for the commitment to it, because it will make a huge difference.
Yes, so thank you, Mayor. I can answer some of those questions, and certainly we will work with Director Jennifer Campbell on working with the Cultural Arts Committee to determine a path forward to ensure that we have the same level of public interaction and participation as we've had with those other projects to move that forward. Additionally, with respect to the mode shift, I do believe we are continuing to work on that effort through Crystal Nahara, who is the CAP program manager. So I will make sure that we double check with her and provide you an update next week. And then finally, with respect to the next phases of Streetscape, we are certainly ready and willing to provide a update similar to this one once we are able to complete a few more additional items with respect to the Streetscape presentation for you to make a determination about the next phase or phases of Streetscape.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. There was a slide that had a picture of the overhead view of the undercrossing, and I wondered if you could pull that up. It was fairly early in the presentation. Yeah, so one of the you know, I've just seen this and noticing that it appears, unlike Santa Fe, where if you're approaching the undercrossing for Santa Fe on Vulcan from the north going south, you can come down the stairs to get through the undercrossing. And if you need ADA access, you have to go further south. but also if you're coming from the south, you go down the ADA ramp to get to the crossing. So in other words, you don't have to go to the other end in order to get down. This doesn't appear to allow people that are approaching from the south to get to the undercrossing without walking up. It looks like, 200 feet maybe, I don't know, but a ways up to get to the ramp to come back down. And so I'm wondering if I'm misreading this or whether there's a limitation that keeps us from being able to create either a staircase or ramp on the south end of that.
So Ed or Allie, would one of you be able to answer that question?
So this is Allie. I know our current configuration does have that where you do have to kind of walk a little bit farther north from the south end, but if Ed's around, he's welcome to weigh in on this on why some decisions were made early on, but we are looking at potential alternative facilitate access from the side on the Vulcan side to put in a ramp or a staircase over there as well.
Yeah, because we're looking for people that are coming down Orpheus to embrace this as a way to get across and get to Stone Steps or the businesses. Obviously, if somebody is at Orpheus and they want to get to Juanita's, it's going to be kind of difficult to attract them to using this. And so, a staircase, although it doesn't seem like it's the end of the world to get that far, if we don't put in a staircase, it's likely that there will be a goat trail that's created. So just something to think about. I hope we can address that. Otherwise, it's really exciting to get to this point. I've been taking regular bike rides to see the construction getting going. It's a little slow getting started. I'm anxious to see some machines there and really moving some dirt, but I was fortunate enough to participate in the ribbon cutting of Santa Fe Drive, and I know just how well used that undercrossing is. And as I've said in the past, I know this is going to be transformational for the surrounding community and will be well used also. And so looking forward to 2022.
Tony.
Yes, sir. Mr. Smith.
It's Bruce Smith from San Diego. I just wanted to let you know the graphic here isn't entirely accurate. There is a stairway on the southeast side of the crossing.
Bruce, you're always so full of good news. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we did have some discussion about a year or so ago about converting it into a ramp, but at that time there wasn't sufficient budget. And then when the bids came in high, we also didn't address it, but we've been asked by the city engineer to prepare an estimate for turning the stairway into a ramp, so there is a better access there. So our design team is currently working on that estimate.
That would be fantastic. So you guys are on it, and I appreciate your forward thinking and looking approach. And I know you were right in the middle of that project at Santa Fe, and I expect this one will come out just as sweet as that one did.
Yeah, no, we're looking forward to it too. We're looking forward to seeing something above the ground, but it will take a few months to see something above the ground.
I'll be patient.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just emphasize the need for there to be a direct, I hope the ramp isn't really long and out of the way. If it's, because when you look at this graph, and I think I've seen a graph that's more up to date than this, but yeah, having a stairway seems like a really good idea, because you don't, like at Santa Fe, there wouldn't be the possibility for a goat trail. It's way too engineered and planted and fenced. But yeah, to make people go all the way around is just, like Tony said, you want people to use it. So let's make sure we're really being mindful of that.
Yeah, no, Mayor Blakespeare, there is a stair. It's just not shown on this graphic.
Okay, good. Perfect.
I would also like to compliment the graphic designers. The logos are nice. I love the El Portal with the little train bridge thing under crossing Dealey Bob. Nice work.
Yeah, and the new renderings are really good. it's nice to see some new renderings. So thank you. Okay, we're almost going to wrap this up. I see Councilmember Hensy has popped up with her hand all of a sudden. So I'm going to call on you. Go for it.
I would second that about the renderings. They're beautiful and they really show that we get to scale back a lot of asphalt and open up more opportunities to better manage our stormwater here with natural techniques. And something that always struck me as appropriate for the art of this undercrossing was that initially there was a theme of history that was meant to be applied for it. And I really like that because when elementary school students are going to and from the beach and the school and the farmer's market, that they're also taking in a bit of the history of their city where they're growing up in. Definitely, I think should still be a focus of whatever art project it is that we decide on. So I'll keep saying that.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you, team. We appreciate it very much. And we'll say goodbye to this item. And yes?
Pat needs to go get his PowerPoint tutorial.
I have to, we did it on Teams earlier and it worked out perfect, but I got to find out what Suzanne did to make that work so well.
Okay, so now we're on to the last item, which are just the reports. So any council member reports or city manager report? City manager report, yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to direct anyone who may be listening that obviously we have some new county public health orders that changes the ability for outdoor restaurant service, and all of that information can be found on the city's website and the county's website. And that is all.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kranz.
I attended a North County Transit District meeting and we had a number of very important things we talked about. It was one of the longest meetings I've ever been to. I didn't manage it very well. I apologize to all the members. So the big deal was a presentation by Delmar regarding the access to the bluffs and crossing the tracks and trespassing and the possibility of a fence. And that, oddly enough, was followed by a discussion about a fence in Oceanside where the original plans for the fence were modified and Oceanside is embracing the fence. So they're a little bit more along the lines of where Encinitas is at. And our fencing situation is still a bit in flux because of the construction that we're currently engaged in along the corridor. But I do expect in the months ahead that there will be more plans formulated and we will be getting presentations on that. I know the other big issue, unfortunately, we had to essentially not make the presentation. We're going to be putting the new coaster locomotives into revenue service next month. You may have seen some of the new locomotives which have a new paint job and look beautiful, as well as new coach cars which have been refurbished. They are running the corridor currently, but they don't have passengers on them. In February, they will begin passenger service. And I am honored to be able to, as the chairman, participate in a press conference on February 8th with the chairwoman of Sandag. And so it will be my honor to have the opportunity to speak to just how important these new locomotives are to the coaster service alongside Catherine. So with that, there were a few other, we discussed our capital improvement program budget, significant enhancements. There will be projects that will run coaster services down to a convention center platform, which will allow people to take the coaster directly to Padres games or to conventions or to the gas lamp district, which has always been a little frustrating because the trains terminated at the depot, leaving you kind of still a long ways away from any fun things to do in San Diego. So looking forward to that.
Well, thank you. I do just want to say, I'm not sure if this was maybe, I don't know exactly if I heard you right, but I think of Encinitas as more like Del Mar and less like Oceanside when it comes to the fencing. And I am not in favor of fencing in Leucadia until we have improvements like the El Portal undercrossing. So I just want to say that on the record because I don't want it to be implicit that somehow I'm in favor of this idea of fencing throughout the corridor in Leucadia. So
well, then we
I
probably should agendize that MOU that we signed with NCTD because it's explicitly stated in there.
I know, but there's a timing issue. So we don't need to have a squabble about it right here. But I think the timing of when the fencing goes up is something that as clearly has been delayed for quite a while in Del Mar, despite the fact that the bluffs are falling into the ocean in Del Mar. You know, I think that it's important to look at that. Anybody else have reports that they want to share from their boards? No? Okay.
Mayor,
What about Sid? Yes.
I just wanted to remind all the residents in District 3 that we are accepting applications for the council vacancy. The deadline for submitting those applications is February 11th at 5 o'clock. And the general qualifications for the applicants are that they must be 18 years of age and a citizen of the state of California. The applicant must be a resident and registered voter of the city of Encinitas in District 3. And a person is disqualified from holding any office upon conviction of designated crimes. So just a reminder to submit applications if they're interested.
Okay, great. Thank you. February 11th is the deadline. That's not very far away. So it's good to remind people of that. Any other report from city attorney?
No report tonight.
Okay, great. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.